The cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. The air was thick with the sounds of clattering trays, laughter, and chatter that echoed off the high school walls. For most students, it was just another day of navigating the social maze, trading jokes and stories between bites of pizza and fries. But for Ethan Carter, 13 years old, and already carrying the weight of more than any kid his age should, the noise felt suffocating. It was just another day of hiding in plain sight. Ethan sat at a corner table, wedged between a row of half-eaten sandwiches and a pile of incomplete math homework. He tried not to draw attention to himself, keeping his head down as he furiously scribbled equations on his notebook. The numbers and symbols blurred together as his pencil moved, each scribble and scratch a desperate attempt to finish his work before the bell rang. But even his best efforts weren't enough. Not today. If you don't finish this in time, Carter, you're dead meat. Ryan's voice had echoed through the halls earlier that morning. Ethan's stomach twisted just thinking about it. Ryan was the kind of guy who made the school a war zone, always picking on anyone who wasn't part of his crew and always making sure those who didn't fit in learned their place. Today, the target was Ethan. As Ethan rushed to finish the last few problems, he could feel the sweat gathering on his forehead. The clock on the wall ticked down with merciless precision. Ryan and his gang were waiting, their taunting voices cutting through the sea of chatter like sharks circling their prey. Ethan had tried to ignore them before. He had tried to blend in, keep his head down, pretend it was just a normal day. But that was never enough. Done yet? Ryan's voice rang out, sharp and cutting, as he and his friends approached the table. Ethan knew what was coming. "Please just let me finish," Ethan muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. But he wasn't talking to Ryan. He was talking to himself, to the part of him that still hoped, still believed, that things could be different. That maybe, just maybe, this time would be the time it wasn't so bad. Ryan leaned over the table, his smirk as wide as ever. "No chance, Carter. Hand it over." Before Ethan could respond, Ryan shoved the stack of papers off the table, scattering them across the floor. The entire cafeteria seemed to pause for a split second, as if the world had momentarily stopped. Ethan's heart slammed against his chest as he scrambled to pick up the pages, trying to organize them before the bell rang. But he already knew it was too late. Ryan and his crew stood in a loose circle around him, laughing at his helplessness. Ethan's hands trembled as he gathered the papers, trying to ignore the eyes that bored into him from every side. "Not so fast, loser," one of Ryan's friends mocked. "You better get this done before lunch ends, or you'll regret it." Ethan stood up, his face flushed with a mix of anger and shame, but before he could respond, a voice interrupted the tension, cool and calm, yet unmistakably confident. "Hey kid, looks like you're having a rough time." Ethan's eyes darted up, and for a moment, he thought he might be seeing things. Standing in front of him, looking down at the mess of papers on the floor, was Elon Musk, the tech mogul and founder of SpaceX and Tesla. Ethan's brain couldn't quite process the sight. Was this real? Or was he hallucinating from the stress? But it was real. Elon Musk, the man who had made headlines for creating rockets and changing the world, was standing right in front of him. You okay?" Elon asked, his gaze flicking from Ethan's trembling hands to the bullying group that loomed behind him. Ryan and his friends stepped back, their mouths hanging open, unsure of how to react. It wasn't every day that the most famous entrepreneur in the world appeared in your high school cafeteria. Elon bent down and picked up one of the scattered papers, handing it back to Ethan. "Tough day?" he asked with a faint, knowing smile. Ethan's mouth went dry, his mind racing. All he could do was nod, not sure what to say. "Why, yeah. You're doing your homework, right?" Elon asked, his tone light. Ethan couldn't help but laugh nervously. "Not really. It's more like surviving," he muttered. Elon's smile softened. "I get it. Life can throw a lot at you. But, you know, the best minds are the ones who keep pushing forward, no matter what." Ethan stared at him, a mix of confusion and awe swirling inside him. What do you mean?" Elon paused, looking around the cafeteria. His gaze lingered for a moment on Ryan and the others, before returning to Ethan. "I mean that when the world gets tough, when people try to knock you down, You have to keep going. You can't let them control your path. You're doing something important here. And don't let anyone take that away from you. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was this really happening? You really think so? Elon nodded, a spark of genuine encouragement in his eyes. Absolutely. And if you ever need some help, well, I'd love to talk to you about what you're working on. I think you've got some potential. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. What? You? Elon chuckled, standing back up. Yeah, I think we could do some cool things together. But for now, let's get you through this lunch. How about you meet me after school? We can talk about your ideas. Before Ethan could respond, Elon gave him a quick, reassuring pat on the back and turned to leave, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the cafeteria, his mind reeling. Ryan and his friends just stood there, stunned into silence. They had no idea how to react. Ethan looked down at the notebook in his hands, his heart racing. What could possibly happen next? The afternoon dragged on. Ethan could hardly focus during the rest of his classes. Every time he tried to pay attention to the lesson, his mind wandered back to the encounter in the cafeteria. It was as if the world had shifted in that moment when Elon Musk had spoken to him. Everything else, his homework, the bullies, his life, seemed distant, almost trivial. Could this really be happening? Was he dreaming? By the time the final bell rang, Ethan was in a haze, his thoughts a tangled mess. The normal chaos of the school day ending felt surreal, as if he were watching it through a foggy glass. He grabbed his backpack, barely noticing the other students as they rushed out of the classroom. His legs felt heavy, and his thoughts kept circling back to that single, impossible moment. Elon Musk, the Elon Musk, had talked to him. He stepped outside and paused by the school's front entrance. The air was cool, the sun dipping low in the sky as the schoolyard began to empty. Ethan hesitated for a moment, wondering if he had misunderstood. Maybe Elon had just been being nice in the moment, or maybe it had all been some kind of joke. What if he doesn't show up? But as if on cue, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The tinted windows rolled down, and there, seated in the back, was Elon Musk himself, casually leaning back in the seat, his eyes bright with anticipation. Hey, Ethan. Elon called with a friendly wave. You ready to talk about your ideas? Ethan's heart skipped. He was stunned. He had expected nothing more than a brief exchange in the cafeteria, but now, here he was, being invited into the world of one of the most influential people on the planet. He nodded eagerly and jogged over to the car. The driver opened the door, and Elon gestured for him to get in. As Ethan slid into the back seat, he felt a mix of awe and nerves flood his system. What was he supposed to say? What could he possibly offer to someone like Elon Musk? As the car started to drive away from the school, Elon leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Ethan. So, tell me more about you, Ethan. What's been going on in that brilliant head of yours? Ethan swallowed hard. The sudden pressure of being asked to speak about his life, his thoughts, his struggles, it felt overwhelming. But something in Elon's calm demeanor put him at ease. The man wasn't rushing him. He wasn't judging him. Well, Ethan started, his voice shaky at first. I don't know. I've just always felt like I'm invisible, I guess. He fiddled with the hem of his jacket, trying to find the right words. Like, people don't really notice me unless it's to make fun of me. Elon nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious but not unkind. I get that. A lot of people who go on to do big things have felt that way at some point. You know, when I was younger, I was shy, and I had my own struggles. People thought I was weird because I liked science and technology instead of sports and parties. Ethan blinked, surprised. Really? You? Yep, Elon said with a small smile. But I used that feeling. I used that isolation to push myself harder. I focused on what I could control, on the things I loved, and over time, I realized something. Sometimes, the people who feel like they don't fit in are the ones who change the world. Ethan felt a spark of hope ignite inside him. Could it really be true? Was he really like Elon? Could he also find a way to do something big, something important, even if he wasn't the most popular kid in school? Elon continued. What are you passionate about, Ethan? You've got a lot more potential than you might realize. Ethan thought for a moment. He had always been obsessed with math, physics, and computers, but no one ever seemed to care. People like Ryan and his friends made it clear that being smart wasn't cool. But here was Elon Musk, one of the richest, most influential people in the world, asking about his passions. I like math, Ethan admitted, almost embarrassed to say it out loud. I guess I like figuring things out, solving problems, you know? Elon's eyes lit up. Ah, problem solving. That's the key to everything. That's how rockets get to space, how electric cars are made, how we move forward as a society. And you're already starting to think that way, Ethan. That's incredible. Ethan's head spun. Could it be possible? Could he really be on the path to something like that? He thought about his classmates, people who mocked him, who saw him as just another shy, nerdy kid. But now, here was the richest man on earth, telling him that his passion for math and solving problems was worth something. As the car rolled through the streets, Elon's words seemed to reverberate in Ethan's mind. He wasn't just some invisible kid anymore. He wasn't just the target for bullies. Maybe, just maybe, he could make something of himself. He could change the narrative. The car pulled up to a sleek, modern building that Ethan didn't recognize. It was huge, with glass walls and futuristic design, almost like something out of a sci-fi movie. Elon turned to Ethan and smiled. Welcome to one of the places where we build the future, Ethan. This is one of my innovation labs. And it's where people who think differently, like you, can make their ideas come to life. Ethan's eyes widened. This was real. He was really here. Elon gestured toward the door. Come on, let's see what you've got. Let's talk about how you can make a difference. As Ethan stepped out of the car, his heart raced with excitement and fear. Was he really ready for this? Could he really step into the world of innovation and change? The possibilities were endless, and Ethan felt a shift inside him. A belief that something big was on the horizon. What could possibly happen next? Would Ethan find the courage to unlock his true potential? And would he rise above the bullying, the fears, and the doubts that had held him back for so long? The door clicked open with a soft, whereas Ethan stepped into Elon Musk's innovation lab. The sight that greeted him was like something straight out of a futuristic dream. The room was vast, illuminated by soft white light that reflected off sleek surfaces. Workstations filled with high-tech equipment lined the walls. Screens blinked with data, and mechanical arms moved in precise, fluid motions, assembling parts for machines Ethan couldn't even begin to recognize. The air was filled with the hum of activity, and the buzz of creativity seemed to vibrate through the room. Elon led the way, walking briskly toward a large desk cluttered with blueprints and prototypes. The walls were covered in whiteboards, filled with equations and diagrams. Every surface seemed to pulse with ideas that were shaping the future. Ethan's heart raced as he took it all in, feeling a mixture of awe and nervousness. This is where it all happens, Ethan, Elon said, turning toward him with a grin. Where we bring the impossible to life. Ethan took a deep breath. He was surrounded by some of the smartest, most creative minds in the world. People who were changing everything from space travel to sustainable energy. Could he really belong here? Could a kid like him, who was still struggling to make it through a school day without being bullied, truly make a difference? Elon picked up a small device from the desk and handed it to Ethan. Here, this is one of our new projects. It's a prototype for a personal AI assistant, something that can help people like you with homework, manage your schedule, and even guide you through complex problems. Ethan's fingers brushed the cool surface of the device. It was small, sleek, and almost too advanced to comprehend. I don't know much about this kind of stuff, he admitted, feeling suddenly small again. I can barely keep up with my schoolwork. Elon's smile softened. That's exactly why I brought you here, Ethan. Because you're already doing the hard part. You're learning. You're asking questions. And most importantly, you're trying. A lot of people stop at I can't. But you're different. You're still asking, how can I? And that's what matters. Ethan felt a spark of hope ignite deep inside him. For the first time in his life, someone like Elon Musk, was looking at him not as a victim of bullying or a kid who couldn't keep up in class, but as a person with potential. Elon pointed to the whiteboard behind him, where a series of equations filled the board. I want you to try something. These are basic algorithms used to train AI. Let's see how far you can get with them. Ethan's throat went dry. Algorithms? AI? He had never even considered anything like this before. But Elon's confidence in him stirred something within him, a quiet determination. He set the device down on the table and walked over to the board, studying the equations. At first, the symbols seemed like a foreign language, but then something clicked. The equations weren't just numbers, they were patterns. They were like puzzles, waiting to be solved. Elon watched him closely, his arms folded, but there was no pressure. Take your time, Ethan. Don't rush. You've got the right instincts. I can see it. Ethan's eyes narrowed in concentration. He picked up a dry erase marker and started tracing through the equations, his mind whirring as he worked through each problem. The more he solved, the clearer it became. It wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about understanding the problem, breaking it down, and finding the solution. Minutes passed like hours, but Ethan didn't mind. The ticking of the clock seemed irrelevant now, his focus consumed entirely by the task at hand. With each equation, his confidence grew, and by the time he reached the last one, he felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd ever known. I think I've got it, Ethan said, stepping back from the board and wiping his hands on his jeans. Elon grinned. You've got it, Ethan. You cracked the code. Ethan stood there, stunned. He had done it. The problem that had once seemed impossible was now solved, and it wasn't just the equations he had conquered. It was the overwhelming sense of doubt that had always held him back. In that moment, Ethan realized that he could do more than just survive. He could thrive. That was amazing, Elon said, his voice full of genuine praise. You've got a natural talent for this. If you keep pushing, who knows what you could accomplish? Ethan smiled, his heart soaring with pride. Thank you. I didn't think I could do it. Elon's expression turned serious, but his eyes were still kind. The key, Ethan, is to never stop trying. Everyone starts somewhere, but it's your determination and willingness to fail that sets you apart. You won't always have the answers immediately, but if you keep going, you'll find your way. Ethan nodded, taking in every word. It was so simple, yet it felt like the answer to everything. Maybe he wasn't just a bullied kid anymore. Maybe, just maybe, he could be someone who changed things. As the evening stretched into night, Elon showed Ethan around the lab, introducing him to other engineers and innovators who were working on everything from renewable energy solutions to Mars colonization. Every person he met shared the same quiet intensity, the same drive to make a difference. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged. When the tour was over, Elon led him back to the car. You've got a lot of potential, Ethan. Keep that spark alive, and I'll be here to help you along the way. Ethan climbed into the back seat, his mind racing. The world had suddenly become a place of infinite possibility. He wasn't just a kid trying to survive school anymore. He was a kid who could change the future. Would Ethan take the lessons he had learned and continue to push forward? Or would the weight of his past, the bullying and the doubts, pull him back? Only time would tell. The following days passed in a blur for Ethan. School had always been a place of torment, where the bullies reigned, and the quiet kids like him kept their heads down to avoid attention. But now, after his time with Elon Musk, it felt different. Ethan couldn't shake the memory of the lab, the equations he solved, and the way Elon believed in him. The words echoed in his mind. You've got potential, Ethan. Keep pushing. But no matter how much he tried to hold on to that feeling, school remained a battlefield. The moment he walked through the school gates the next morning, reality set in. Ryan and his group of friends were waiting by the lockers, laughing and pointing, as usual. Well, look who it is. Mr. Genius himself, Ryan jeered, his voice dripping with mockery. Did you solve the world's problems, or are you still too busy daydreaming in math class? Ethan's stomach tightened. He could feel the weight of the old, familiar feeling of dread. The last thing he wanted was to face Ryan and his friends right now, especially with everything that had happened the day before. But instead of shrinking away like he usually did, Ethan stood tall and clenched his fists. I'm not interested in your jokes, Ryan, Ethan said, his voice steady. I've got more important things to focus on now. Ryan's eyes narrowed, clearly taken aback by Ethan's newfound confidence. Oh, really? What's that? Building your own spaceship? Ryan snickered, elbowing his friends. Ethan didn't back down. He stood there, looking Ryan squarely in the eye. "Maybe not a spaceship," he said calmly, "but I'm working on something that matters." Ryan scoffed, but his eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Whatever, loser. You'll never be anything more than the quiet kid who gets shoved in lockers." As Ryan and his group walked away, Ethan's heart pounded. He hadn't backed down, but the sting of their words still echoed in his mind. How could I be something more? He had promised himself that he wouldn't let the bullying define him anymore, but it was hard. Every day at school, the pressure mounted. The more he tried to push forward, the more Ryan and the others seemed determined to pull him back. That afternoon, Ethan sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at his food. He couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the conversation he had with Elon, to the spark of hope that had flickered inside him. But it seemed so distant now, like a dream that was slipping through his fingers. Suddenly, a shadow fell over his table. Ethan looked up to see Samantha, a quiet girl from his math class, standing there, holding her lunch tray. Samantha was one of the few people who didn't mock him, and they had exchanged a few polite words in class, but they weren't exactly friends. "You're sitting alone?" Samantha asked, raising an eyebrow. "You usually hang out with the geeks, don't you?" Ethan gave a half-hearted smile. "I guess I'm just thinking about stuff." Samantha sat down across from him. "I get that. You're probably thinking about that Elon Musk guy you met, huh?" Ethan froze, his eyes widening. "How do you know about that?" "Are you kidding? It's all over the school. People are talking about it, asking how the genius got to meet Elon Musk." Samantha rolled her eyes, but there was no malice in her voice. "Don't let them get to you. They're just jealous." Ethan's shoulders sagged slightly. "I don't know. It's hard. I mean, Ryan, he's not going to let me live this down. He already makes fun of me for being smart. Now, it's like everyone's treating me like some kind of joke." Samantha nodded, her expression softening. "I get it. People are afraid of what they don't understand. They see someone like you, someone who's into math and tech, and they think you're weird. But what they don't get is that you've got something they don't. You're not afraid to dream big." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Could it be true? Could he really have something that others didn't? He had always seen himself as just another nerd. But maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe he could take his passion for solving problems and actually do something with it. But just as quickly as the hope flared, it dimmed. The lunch bell rang, and the students started packing up, heading for their next classes. Ethan gathered his things, lost in thought. As he made his way to his next class, he couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what he did, he was still the target. Later that evening, as Ethan sat at his desk, his mind wandered back to Elon Musk's words. "The key is never stopping. Keep pushing." But it was easier said than done. With every passing day, the pressure mounted. The bullying didn't stop. Ryan found new ways to humiliate him, making snide remarks in class, mimicking his voice, spreading rumors about him. Ethan thought about quitting. He thought about going back to being the quiet kid who kept his head down and his mouth shut. It would be easier. But then he thought about the lab again, about the equations he'd solved, and the spark of possibility he'd felt. No, he couldn't go back. He had to keep moving forward. That night, Ethan opened his laptop and began researching more about AI, technology, and problem solving. He might not have all the answers yet, but he was going to find them. And if the bullies didn't like it, too bad. He wasn't going to let them hold him back anymore. Would Ethan be able to break free from the grip of the bullies? Could he continue to chase his dreams, even when the road ahead seemed filled with obstacles? Or would he fall back into the shadows once again? Ethan barely slept that night. His mind raced as he lay in bed, thinking about the school day, about Elon's encouraging words, and about the bullying he faced every single time he walked into school. He tried to focus on the positive, his work with Elon, the spark of possibility he felt when solving those equations. But every time he thought about it, Ryan's mocking voice cut through the optimism. "Mr. Genius," Ryan had called him, "you'll never be anything but a joke." Ethan clenched his fists under the covers, feeling the weight of those words pressing down on him. How could he be someone important if everyone around him just saw him as a target? How could he be the person Elon believed in if he couldn't even make it through a day without being humiliated? The next morning, Ethan forced himself to get up. His body felt heavy as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he knew he had to go to school. He couldn't hide away forever. When he arrived at school, he expected it to be like every other day, full of whispers, jokes, and stares. But today was different. As he walked through the crowded hallway, he noticed something strange. Ryan wasn't there. At first, Ethan didn't think much of it. Maybe Ryan was sick. Maybe he was just late. But as the day wore on, he realized that Ryan's absence wasn't just a fluke. No one was picking on him. No one was laughing behind his back. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt normal. He tried to enjoy the silence, but a sense of unease crept up on him. Why wasn't Ryan tormenting him today? Was it just a temporary break, or was something else going on? The whole day, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the calm before the storm was too good to be true. By lunch, Ethan was walking through the cafeteria when he saw Samantha sitting with a group of people. She waved him over. "Hey, you're not eating alone today," she called with a grin. Ethan hesitated for a moment before walking over to her. He didn't really have any friends at school, and the idea of sitting with people he didn't know was still nerve-wracking. But Samantha was different. She didn't judge him or tease him. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. As he sat down, one of the boys in the group, a kid named Jake, looked up at him with an amused expression. "So, you're the kid who got to meet Elon Musk, huh?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Yeah, that's me." Jake chuckled. "Pretty cool. You must be some kind of genius, huh?" Ethan flushed. "I'm not. I just—" Before he could finish, the doors to the cafeteria slammed open. Ethan turned to see Ryan and his group walking in, loud and rowdy, like they always did. But something was different. Ryan wasn't smirking today. His eyes were dark, narrowed with something Ethan couldn't place. Ethan's heart began to race. He could feel the tension in the air. Ryan's gaze locked onto him across the cafeteria, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, without warning, Ryan marched over to their table. "Hey, Samantha," Ryan said, his voice sharp. "I didn't know you were hanging out with this loser." He sneered at Ethan. "Did you get to take a selfie with Elon while you were at it, geek?" Samantha's expression hardened. "Ryan, don't start." But Ryan wasn't done. He turned to the group of kids around the table. "Look at him," he said, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "The kid thinks he's all special because he met some rich guy. What's next? Are we all supposed to bow down to you because you're the genius?" Ethan's chest tightened. The words hit harder than they ever had before. But this time, something in him snapped. He had been pushed around for too long, and he wasn't going to take it anymore. Standing up, he looked Ryan straight in the eyes. "You don't know anything about me. I don't need your approval, Ryan. I don't need anyone's approval. I'm not going to let you or anyone else make me feel small anymore." Ryan's smirk faltered, and the cafeteria seemed to go silent for a moment. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears, but the anger and frustration he had carried for so long gave him strength. He wasn't going to back down this time. Samantha, Jake, and the others around the table were watching him, their eyes wide. There was a brief moment where Ethan wondered if they would turn away, if they would join in with Ryan's mocking. But then Samantha spoke, her voice steady. "Ryan, enough. You've been picking on him for months, and it's getting old. No one here thinks you're funny anymore." Ryan's face flushed with anger, but he didn't say anything more. After a tense silence, he turned and stalked off with his friends. Ethan stood there, his breath coming in heavy gasps. He couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time in his life, he had stood up to Ryan, and it felt incredible. Samantha looked at him with a mixture of admiration and surprise. "I didn't know you had it in you, Ethan. That was awesome." Ethan's shoulders relaxed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks. I guess I had to stop running." As the lunch bell rang, Ethan gathered his things, still in a daze. He had faced his biggest bully and won. But more than that, he had taken control of his life in a way he never had before. As he walked out of the cafeteria, he couldn't help but think of Elon's words again. Keep pushing. Keep going, no matter what. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Ethan knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way anymore. Would Ethan be able to keep his newfound confidence, or would Ryan's next move knock him back down? The battle wasn't over yet, but Ethan was ready for whatever came next. The days after the confrontation in the cafeteria were strangely quiet. Ryan and his friends had backed off, but Ethan knew better than to believe it was over. The silence was just the calm before the storm. Still, it felt good. For the first time in a long time, he walked the halls without fear, without the weight of their mocking stares on his back. He wasn't just surviving school anymore. He was living it. But even as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Despite the small victories, standing up to Ryan, getting a taste of what it was like to believe in himself, Ethan still wasn't sure of his place in the world. He had the passion for science, the dreams that Elon had planted in him, but where did he go from here? One afternoon, as he sat in his usual seat in the library, buried in books about artificial intelligence and technology, he heard a voice behind him. "Thinking about saving the world again, Ethan?" Ethan spun around, his heart racing. He hadn't realized anyone was standing there. It was Mr. Bennett, the school's most eccentric teacher. Mr. Bennett taught the advanced technology course, the class that Ethan had begged to be allowed into when he first came to the school. He was the kind of teacher who didn't follow the usual rules, who challenged his students to think outside the box. Ethan had admired him from the moment he'd stepped into the classroom, and though Mr. Bennett had always been kind, he never had much of a chance to speak with him outside of class. Yeah, I guess so," Ethan said, adjusting his glasses nervously. Mr. Bennett smiled, his eyes twinkling behind his wire-framed glasses. "You know, I've been watching you, Ethan. You've got a spark. I see it in your eyes." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Really? I didn't think anyone noticed." "Well, I've noticed," Mr. Bennett said, pulling a chair over and sitting down next to him. "You've got something special, but it's going to take more than just reading books to get where you want to go. You've got to build, create, experiment. That's how you make things happen." Ethan felt a surge of excitement in his chest. "I want to, but I don't know where to start." Mr. Bennett leaned back, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "Start by asking the right questions. What problem do you want to solve? And don't just think about what's easy. Think about what's important. What will make a difference?" Ethan's mind started to race. The question seemed simple enough, but it was profound. What did he want to solve? He didn't have the answer yet, but he could feel something beginning to click. "Think about Elon Musk," Mr. Bennett continued. "Do you think he woke up one day and just knew? No. He asked questions. He found problems that others were too afraid to tackle, and he solved them." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. The same excitement he had felt when he was working with Elon started to rise within him again. This was it. This was what he needed. The world was full of problems, and he had the ability to solve them. It wasn't just about impressing people anymore. It was about making an impact. "Mr. Bennett," Ethan said suddenly, his voice filled with conviction, "I want to build something that will actually change the way people live. I want to create an AI that can solve real-world problems. I don't just want to be a smart kid who gets good grades. I want to matter." Mr. Bennett's smile widened, and he placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "That's what I've been waiting to hear. Let's make it happen." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Mr. Bennett took Ethan under his wing, showing him how to turn his passion into action. He taught him the fundamentals of AI development, guiding him through coding, programming, and real-world problem-solving. It wasn't easy. There were times when Ethan wanted to give up, when the frustration of failing again and again seemed too much to bear. But each time, Mr. Bennett pushed him to keep going, to find the solution even when it felt impossible. "You're doing great," Mr. Bennett would say after every failed attempt, as if the setbacks were just part of the process. "Remember, every failure is a step toward success." But even with Mr. Bennett's guidance, Ethan still faced obstacles. The pressure to prove himself continued to mount. As the project grew more complex, so did the challenges. And then, just when he thought things were starting to fall into place, a new threat emerged. It started with a single comment on his latest project, a small AI prototype he had been working on with Mr. Bennett. The comment came from a group of kids in the advanced technology class, led by none other than Ryan. "Nice try, Ethan," Ryan's voice boomed across the classroom. "I guess the genius finally decided to build something. Too bad it's just a pile of junk." Ethan's heart sank. He had been so focused on the project, so excited about what he was creating, that he hadn't considered the possibility of more ridicule. Ryan's words hit hard, especially when they were in front of a group of people who didn't know the whole story. But this time was different. Ethan didn't let the words sink in. Instead, he stood up, facing Ryan with newfound confidence. "You think this is junk? Fine," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But this junk is going to change the world one day. You'll see." Mr. Bennett, who had been watching from the back of the room, smiled proudly. "That's the spirit, Ethan. Keep pushing. Don't let anyone stop you." Ethan sat back down, his determination solidifying. This wasn't just about proving Ryan wrong. This was about proving to himself that he could do it, that he could be the person he dreamed of becoming. As Ethan continued to develop his project, he knew that the road ahead would be filled with more challenges. But he wasn't alone. With Mr. Bennett's mentorship and his own unshakable resolve, Ethan was ready for whatever came next. Could he truly change the world with his AI? Or would the obstacles before him prove to be too much? It had been 2 months since Mr. Bennett took Ethan under his wing, and the progress Ethan had made was nothing short of extraordinary. His AI prototype, though still far from perfect, was becoming more and more sophisticated. He could feel the momentum building inside him. But even with his newfound focus and determination, one constant threat remained: Ryan. Every time Ethan thought things were finally turning around, Ryan seemed to appear, like a dark cloud following him wherever he went. It wasn't just the taunts in class anymore. Ryan had made it personal. One day, as Ethan was walking to his locker, he spotted Ryan talking to a group of students in the hallway. Ethan tried to slip past, hoping for a peaceful escape, but Ryan spotted him immediately. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Genius again," Ryan sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone around them to hear. "Are you still pretending to be Elon Musk, or whatever? You really think you're going to be the next big tech billionaire? You can't even fix your own pathetic little project?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had worked so hard on his AI, and here was Ryan, once again, trying to crush his dreams with just a few cruel words. But this time, Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders, meeting Ryan's gaze with a calm he hadn't felt before. "You can say whatever you want, Ryan, but I'm not stopping. I'm going to make this work, and one day, you'll see." Ryan let out a sarcastic laugh. "Yeah, right. Like anyone's going to take you seriously. You're just a kid with a weird hobby. No one cares about your little computer programs." Ethan felt the sting of Ryan's words, but they didn't have the same weight they used to. He had come too far, worked too hard, to let someone like Ryan drag him down. "You'll see, Ryan," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me." With that, he turned away and walked down the hall, leaving Ryan and his group behind. But as he made his way to the library, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Despite his defiant words, a nagging doubt began to creep in. What if Ryan was right? What if no one cared about his project? It wasn't the first time Ethan had doubted himself, but this felt different. This time, the pressure was mounting. His project had to work. He had to prove that he wasn't just some kid who could dream big but couldn't back it up. But the more he worked on it, the more it felt like the walls were closing in. That afternoon, as he sat at his desk in Mr. Bennett's classroom, staring at the lines of code on his computer screen, he felt overwhelmed. The AI was still glitching, and no matter how many times he tried to fix it, it just wouldn't work. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but for the first time, he didn't know what to do next. Mr. Bennett walked in, looking over his shoulder at the screen. "How's it going, Ethan?" Ethan let out a deep sigh. "It's not going well. I've tried everything, but the program keeps crashing. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake?" Mr. Bennett raised an eyebrow. "A mistake? You've come a long way. I've seen your progress. What's bothering you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. It just feels like I'm not good enough. Like no matter how much I try, I'll never be able to make this work. What if everyone was right? What if I'm just some kid pretending to be something I'm not?" Mr. Bennett smiled and pulled up a chair next to Ethan. Let me tell you something, Ethan. There's always going to be people who doubt you. There are always going to be obstacles, failures, setbacks. But what separates the people who succeed from those who don't isn't talent or intelligence. It's perseverance. It's the ability to get up every time you fall. The people who change the world don't give up when things get tough. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Mr. Bennett looked him in the eye. Failing isn't the end, Ethan. It's part of the process. Every failure brings you closer to the solution. You have to embrace the challenges, not run from them. You've already proven that you're capable of so much. Just don't stop now. Ethan felt a flicker of hope stir inside him. Mr. Bennett was right. Failure didn't mean the end. It was just a part of the journey. He wasn't going to let Ryan or anyone else define him. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't going to let his doubts control him anymore. He had something important to create. He had a dream, and nothing was going to stand in his way. As he walked into school, he felt the weight of his doubts still lingering, but he carried them with him, ready to face them head-on. When he entered the classroom, he noticed that Ryan was already there, talking to a group of friends. Ryan shot him a glance but didn't say anything. Ethan didn't care. He had a project to finish. He had a future to build. But just as Ethan began to feel confident again, a new challenge emerged. The AI wasn't the only thing he had to fight for. With his resolve now stronger than ever, Ethan would need to prove that his belief in himself was enough to keep going. But would he be able to face his biggest challenge yet? The weight of the world had never felt heavier than it did in the days following his conversation with Mr. Bennett. Ethan's mind raced non-stop, thoughts and ideas bouncing off each other with increasing intensity. His AI project was growing more complex every day, but so were the challenges. What had started as a school assignment had become something much bigger, something that felt like it could change everything. Yet, even as his determination solidified, another pressure weighed on him. It wasn't just the doubts inside his head or the mockery from Ryan that gnawed at him. It was the constant reminders of how far he was from reaching his goals, how much he had yet to accomplish. Despite his efforts, the AI still wasn't functioning the way he needed it to. Every time he thought he had fixed one bug, another appeared. The program was filled with errors, and the deeper Ethan dug, the more flaws he found. There were days when it seemed like no matter what he did, the code just wouldn't work. It was as if the program had a mind of its own, refusing to obey the rules Ethan was so desperately trying to impose. In one of those moments of frustration, he found himself staring at the blank screen, unsure of how to move forward. His hands hovered over the keyboard, aching to type something that would make everything click, but the words wouldn't come. His brain felt like it was running in circles, and his doubts surged once more. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," he muttered under his breath, staring at the lines of code. "Maybe I really am just a kid playing with things I don't understand." It was then that Mr. Bennett walked in, his usual calm presence offering an anchor amid Ethan's storm of thoughts. "How's it going, Ethan?" Mr. Bennett asked, taking a seat next to him. Ethan sighed, running his hands through his hair. "It's not going well. The AI keeps malfunctioning, and I'm out of ideas. Maybe I'm not the person I thought I was." Mr. Bennett studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're feeling stuck, huh?" Ethan nodded, his eyes hardening. "I don't know what to do anymore. I've tried everything. I thought I could make it work, but now it feels like it's all falling apart." Mr. Bennett smiled, but there was no hint of pity in his expression, only understanding. "Let me tell you something, Ethan. You're not the first person to feel like this, and you won't be the last. What you're going through right now, it's normal. You're pushing yourself harder than ever before. And when you do that, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture." Ethan looked at him, confused. "But the bigger picture? It doesn't feel like there's a bigger picture right now. It feels like I'm failing." Mr. Bennett chuckled softly. "Failure is just a part of the process. Think of it like this. Every time you fail, you learn something new. You get closer to your goal. But it's not just about the goal itself, Ethan. It's about who you become along the way." Ethan frowned. "But I don't want to fail. I can't afford to fail." Mr. Bennett leaned forward. "No one wants to fail. but you can't live in fear of it. If you're scared of failure, you'll never succeed. Remember this, Ethan. The best innovators, the people who change the world, don't succeed on their first try. They keep going, and they never give up. Ethan stared at the screen, his thoughts swirling. It was hard to accept. He had always been a perfectionist. But maybe Mr. Bennett was right. Maybe this was part of the journey. You think I can fix it? Ethan asked quietly. I don't just think you can fix it, Mr. Bennett said with confidence. I know you can, but you need to trust yourself, Ethan. You've got the talent. You've got the heart. Now it's time to put your fear aside and push through. Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. Okay, I'm going to do it. But just as he was about to return to his work, a loud voice interrupted his thoughts. Well. Looks like we've got a little genius in the making. Ethan's stomach dropped as he recognized Ryan's voice. He didn't even have to turn around to know that Ryan was standing there, with his usual group of friends snickering behind him. You're still messing with that dumb AI? Ryan mocked, stepping into the classroom. Maybe if you spent less time trying to play scientist, you'd actually be good at something. Ethan clenched his fists, but instead of snapping back, he took a deep breath. He wasn't going to let Ryan get to him. Not this time. He had bigger things to focus on. You know, Ryan, Ethan said calmly, his voice steady. One day, you're going to look back and wish you didn't waste so much time mocking people who were trying to do something important. Ryan laughed, but Ethan didn't flinch. Is that what this is? Trying to impress everyone with your little project? Ryan sneered. You really think anyone's going to care about your AI? No one's going to remember you, Ethan. Ethan locked eyes with Ryan, feeling a surge of determination rise in his chest. I don't need to impress anyone. I'm doing this for me. Ryan opened his mouth to say something else, but before he could speak, Mr. Bennett intervened. All right, that's enough, Ryan, Mr. Bennett said firmly. If you're done with the jokes, why don't you let Ethan get back to his work? I think he's got better things to do than listen to you. Ryan shot a final glare at Ethan before turning and walking out of the room with his friends, muttering under his breath. Ethan exhaled, his body tense but his mind clearer than it had been in days. Ryan had always tried to push him down, but now, Ethan knew better. His worth wasn't determined by Ryan's opinion, or anyone else's, for that matter. With renewed resolve, Ethan turned back to his computer and began typing once more. As Ethan focused on his work, he could feel the pieces of his AI project beginning to fall into place. It wasn't easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. He was no longer afraid to fail. Would his newfound strength be enough to finish the project and prove himself? Or would the pressure push him to his breaking point? Ethan sat at his desk late into the night, surrounded by empty coffee cups and stacks of papers. The dim glow of his computer screen illuminated his tired face as he continued to work on the AI project. It had been weeks since the incident with Ryan, and while Ethan had managed to block out the negativity, the pressure was mounting. The deadline for his presentation was just days away, and the AI still wasn't perfect. He had fixed the major glitches, at least, he thought he had. But now the program was failing in new ways. The user interface wasn't responding as smoothly as he wanted, and there were still countless minor bugs that refused to be fixed. It felt like every step forward was met with 2 steps back. In the back of his mind, Ethan couldn't shake the constant nagging fear. What if he wasn't good enough? What if all this effort was for nothing? What if, despite everything, he failed? His phone buzzed, breaking the silence of the room. He glanced at the screen. A message from his mom. Don't stay up too late, Ethan. You need your rest. I'm proud of you. You're going to do great things. Ethan smiled faintly at the message, but the words didn't carry the same weight they used to. No matter how much his mom believed in him, Ethan couldn't help but feel like a fraud. He wasn't the genius everyone thought he was. He wasn't some prodigy who could solve complex problems without breaking a sweat. He was just a kid with big dreams that didn't seem to be panning out. As if on cue, a knock on the door broke his reverie. He looked up to see Mr. Bennett standing in the doorway, holding a coffee cup in his hand. I figured you could use some company, Mr. Bennett said with a smile, stepping into the room and placing the coffee cup on the desk. Ethan didn't have the energy to protest. Thanks, Mr. Bennett, he muttered. rubbing his eyes. Mr. Bennett sat down across from him, his eyes scanning the computer screen before landing back on Ethan. "How's the project coming along?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not. I've hit another roadblock. I thought I was making progress, but now the interface is all messed up, and I can't fix it. I don't know what to do anymore." Mr. Bennett studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. "Ethan, you're allowed to struggle. It's part of the process. The question isn't whether you're going to fail, it's how you're going to handle it when it happens." Ethan stared at him, confused. "But what if I don't have what it takes? What if I just can't make this work?" "Then you keep going," Mr. Bennett replied firmly. "You keep going because you're not doing this for anyone else. You're doing this for yourself. And that's what matters. I've seen you work hard. I've seen you push through every challenge. You don't give up when things get tough. You find a way. And that's why I know you're capable of doing this." Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of Mr. Bennett's words settle on his shoulders. "I've been trying so hard, but what if it's still not good enough? What if I present this and everyone just sees it as a failure?" "Failure isn't the end of the world, Ethan," Mr. Bennett said with a reassuring smile. "It's just a step in the process. And if this AI doesn't work the way you want it to, you'll learn from it. You'll improve. The only failure is in giving up." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to absorb what Mr. Bennett was saying. His mind still raced, filled with doubts, but there was a part of him that wanted to believe. He wanted to believe that everything he'd done wasn't in vain. He didn't want to back down now, not after everything he'd sacrificed to get this far. But even as his resolve strengthened, the pressure from the upcoming presentation still weighed heavily on his chest. He had no idea how his classmates would react, let alone the judges who would evaluate his work. What if they didn't see the potential in his AI? What if they laughed at it? But in that moment, something inside Ethan clicked. He had come this far. He couldn't stop now. He looked at Mr. Bennett, a spark of determination lighting up his eyes. "You're right. I'm not going to give up. I'll finish this, no matter what it takes." Mr. Bennett grinned. "I knew you would. And just so you know, I'm proud of you, win or lose." Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. He had always felt alone in his struggles, but now, with Mr. Bennett's support, it felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders anymore. As Mr. Bennett left the room, Ethan turned back to his computer. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could see the finish line. The road ahead was still long, but he wasn't going to let fear or doubt stand in his way. He wasn't going to let anyone, or anything, tell him he couldn't do this. With renewed focus, he began to type, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The AI wasn't perfect yet, but it didn't matter. He was going to give it everything he had. If he failed, he would learn. If he succeeded, he would prove that he was capable of far more than anyone had ever given him credit for. And as the clock ticked on, Ethan worked through the night, driven by a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just trying to create an AI anymore. He was proving to himself that he could do anything he set his mind to. But just as Ethan felt like he was finally getting somewhere, a new challenge emerged. The final presentation was fast approaching, and the pressure was only going to intensify. Could he hold it together and make his vision a reality? Or would this be the moment everything fell apart? Ethan could feel the pressure mounting with every passing hour. The deadline for his AI project presentation was just a day away, and there was no turning back. His heart raced with the anticipation of it all. It wasn't just about showing the judges how smart he was. It was about proving to himself that he could face the challenge and come out victorious. But with every new bug and error he encountered in his code, that sense of accomplishment slipped further out of reach. He had barely slept the night before, focusing all his energy on fixing the issues with the user interface. The AI was running more smoothly now, but there were still glitches he couldn't quite iron out. He knew that if those glitches were noticed during the presentation, it could all come crashing down. Just a few more tweaks, he muttered to himself, staring at the screen, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of where to begin. But he had no choice. The clock was ticking. As he worked, the door to his room creaked open, and his mom's voice called out softly, "Ethan, dinner's ready." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He was too engrossed in the task at hand. The last thing he wanted to do was take a break. The stakes were too high. But after a few moments, he sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "I'll be there in a minute," he called back, his voice hoarse. He glanced at the clock on his wall. It was nearly 7 p.m. The presentation was at 10 a.m. the next morning. He had just a few hours to get everything ready. Ethan stood up and stretched, walking out of his room. His mom was at the table, setting out plates of food. She smiled warmly at him as he sat down. "You've been working so hard on that project," she said, her tone filled with both pride and concern. "But you need to take care of yourself, too." Ethan smiled weakly, picking up his fork. "I'm fine, Mom. I just want to make sure it's perfect." "You don't have to be perfect, Ethan," his mom replied gently. "You just need to give it your best." Her words hung in the air, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't enough. No matter how many times people told him he didn't have to be perfect, he still felt the weight of that expectation. The pressure to succeed was suffocating. Every failure, every glitch felt like a personal attack on his abilities. When dinner was over, Ethan returned to his room, his mind racing. He felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. What if it all went wrong? What if the judges saw through the cracks in his project and judged him for not being perfect? But then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, half expecting another message from Mr. Bennett offering words of encouragement. Instead, it was a text from Ryan. "I hear you're presenting your AI tomorrow. Hope it doesn't crash and burn like everything else you've done. Good luck, you'll need it." The words stung more than he cared to admit. Ryan had been a constant thorn in his side, always undermining his efforts. But now, as the moment of truth approached, the cruel words felt even more biting. Ethan clenched his fists, taking a deep breath. He couldn't let Ryan's words get to him. He couldn't afford to let anyone else's opinions dictate his worth. He had worked too hard to let this moment slip away. With a renewed sense of determination, he returned to his computer. His fingers moved faster than before, navigating through the code with a focus he hadn't felt in days. There were still glitches, still bugs, but this time, he wasn't going to let them defeat him. He was going to fix them, one by one. And then, as if a light bulb went off in his head, he saw it. The one line of code that had been causing all the issues. It had been right in front of him the entire time, hidden in the depths of the program. With a few quick keystrokes, he corrected the error. He held his breath as he ran the program again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the AI flashed to life on the screen, running smoother than it ever had before. The interface was responsive. The bugs had disappeared. Ethan's heart raced as he looked at the screen in disbelief. It was working. The AI was finally working. He couldn't believe it. After all the late nights, all the doubt, and all the pressure, he had done it. He had built something that actually worked. He leaned back in his chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over him, but also a deep sense of relief. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. He had given it everything he had, and that was enough. Ethan grabbed his phone and quickly shot a message to Mr. Bennett. "It works. I finally fixed it." Almost instantly, Mr. Bennett replied, "I knew you could do it. Now go get some sleep. You've earned it." Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. The words from Mr. Bennett, and even his mom's earlier encouragement, had made all the difference. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about doing his best, and that was exactly what he had done. But just as Ethan was about to shut down his computer and head to bed, another text popped up on his phone. This time, it was from an unknown number. "I hope you're ready for tomorrow. There's a surprise waiting for you." Ethan frowned at the message. It wasn't from anyone he knew. He was about to shrug it off as spam when his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video clip. Ethan hesitated before clicking it. The video started with a shaky camera shot of the classroom where the presentation was being held. And then, in the center of the frame, a man appeared. It was Ryan. Ethan's stomach dropped. What was going on? Why was Ryan involved in this? And what was the surprise? As Ethan prepared for the final presentation, the weight of the unknown seemed to press in on him from all sides. What did Ryan have planned? Was this really just another trick, or was it something more? The pressure was mounting, And the surprises weren't over yet. Ethan's mind raced as he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the cryptic video Ryan had sent him. He couldn't help but feel a pit form in his stomach. Why would Ryan send this? Was it a prank? Was this part of his twisted way of getting under Ethan's skin? The idea that Ryan had orchestrated something to sabotage him made Ethan's blood run cold. But then, as he played the video again, a thought gnawed at him. What if it wasn't a prank? What if Ryan had some sort of plan? The clock on his desk read 9:30 p.m. He should have been sleeping, resting up for the big day ahead, but his mind wouldn't allow it. With the presentation just hours away, the weight of everything felt unbearable. The AI was finally running smoothly, but now, with Ryan's threat looming over him, Ethan wasn't sure he could keep his focus. What if Ryan had already made his move? What if the surprise was something far worse than a simple trick? Ethan took a deep breath and shook his head. Focus. He had worked so hard for this moment, and no one, especially Ryan, was going to take that away from him. He couldn't let fear and doubt control him. Not now. Determined to push the thought of Ryan out of his mind, Ethan opened up his computer once more. He reviewed the final adjustments on his AI program, checking for any last-minute fixes he might have missed. But with each keystroke, the nagging feeling that something was off refused to go away. The clock was ticking, and everything was riding on this presentation. As he leaned in closer to the screen, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Ryan. It was from Mr. Bennett. Ethan, I know you're nervous, but remember what we talked about. You've got this. You've already done the hard work. Now just show them what you've built. Ethan smiled at the message, but the smile quickly faded as a new text notification appeared. It was from the same unknown number. The message simply read, "You won't be able to hide your mistakes tomorrow. The truth will come out." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What does that mean? The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls closed in, and his thoughts started to spiral. The pressure he had been carrying for weeks now felt like a weight he could no longer hold. What if everything failed in front of everyone tomorrow? What if his AI crashed and burned? What if he let down Mr. Bennett, his mom, and himself? He shook his head violently, trying to push the thoughts away. No, he whispered to himself. I'm not going to let this happen. With renewed determination, Ethan quickly grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. His mind still raced, but he knew he had to do something to clear his head. He couldn't afford to let the fear get the best of him. As he walked through the quiet streets, the cool night air stung his face, helping him focus. His footsteps echoed in the empty streets, the only sound besides the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. He found himself at the park, the same park where he and Mr. Bennett had talked a few days earlier. The park was empty now, the playground quiet under the dim streetlights. Ethan sat down on one of the benches, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. He needed to think. His phone buzzed again. Ready to fail tomorrow? Everyone's going to see what you've been hiding. It'll be hilarious. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. His fingers clenched around his phone, but he refused to let it get to him. Ryan was trying to mess with his head, to undermine his confidence. It was all part of the game. But what if Ryan's right? Ethan quickly dismissed the thought. He couldn't afford to go down that road. He had worked too hard. His project wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was his. No one could take that away from him. With that resolve in mind, he returned home. He didn't sleep much that night. The anxiety gnawed at him, but he pushed through it, determined to give his best effort tomorrow. The next morning, Ethan stood in front of his computer, staring at his presentation slide. The AI was loaded and ready to go. His hands shook as he clicked through the slides, making final adjustments. He checked his reflection in the screen, barely recognizing the tired, stressed face staring back at him. As the time to present drew nearer, Ethan felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. There was no turning back. The room would be filled with people, all watching, waiting for him to deliver. His future was riding on this moment, and it felt like everything was going to come crashing down around him. He walked into the classroom, carrying his laptop. His classmates were already there, seated in rows, chatting nervously among themselves. The judges were sitting at the front of the room, their eyes scanning the room, waiting for the presentations to begin. Ethan found a seat in the back and sat down, trying to calm his nerves. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with Ryan, who was sitting across the room with a smug look on his face. Ryan's words from the night before echoed in his mind. The truth will come out. But Ethan refused to let fear control him. He had worked hard for this moment, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even Ryan, ruin it. When it was finally his turn, Ethan walked up to the front of the room, his laptop in hand. The bright lights of the projector felt like they were bearing down on him as he set up his presentation. He glanced at the judges, who were staring at him expectantly, and then he clicked the button to start his presentation. The AI booted up smoothly on the screen, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But as Ethan spoke, explaining the details of his project, something felt off. A sudden glitch in the AI caused the screen to freeze. The room fell silent, and for a moment, Ethan felt his heart stop. He quickly tried to fix the issue, but the glitch persisted, causing him to stumble over his words. Ryan's laughter echoed across the room. Ethan's face turned bright red. The pressure was unbearable. He had worked so hard, but it seemed like everything was falling apart in front of him. And then, he remembered Mr. Bennett's words. Failure isn't the end of the world. It's just a step in the process. With a deep breath, Ethan forced himself to calm down. He rebooted the program one last time. This time, when the AI loaded, it worked. The room was silent for a moment, but then a soft murmur began. Ethan continued his presentation, his confidence building as the AI ran smoothly on the screen. By the time he was finished, the room was filled with applause. Ethan smiled, but it was bittersweet. The battle wasn't over yet. As Ethan stood at the front of the room, the tension began to fade, but the damage wasn't done. Ryan's words still echoed in his mind, and the stakes were only going to get higher from here. Was this the moment Ethan had been waiting for, or was there something even worse waiting to unfold? Ethan stood backstage, his heart still pounding from the rush of his presentation. His hands were sweaty, and his palms felt clammy as he clutched his laptop, unsure of what to expect next. The room had erupted into applause after the AI successfully completed its demonstration, but it wasn't the applause that stuck with him. It was the lingering tension, the feeling that Ryan was still waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. He'd made it this far, hadn't he? He'd overcome the odds, fixed the glitch, and delivered his work to the best of his ability. But the weight of Ryan's threat still hung over him like a dark cloud. Ryan had always been there, mocking, taunting, and testing Ethan's resolve. But something was different now. Ethan could feel the shift. He wasn't the same person who had walked into the competition just a few months ago. No, he had changed. He had grown stronger, more focused, and perhaps, just maybe, even capable of taking on whatever Ryan threw his way. The door opened, and Mr. Bennett walked in with a warm smile. Ethan, you did great out there, he said, clapping him on the back. I'm proud of you. Ethan smiled, his chest swelling with pride, but the feeling was short-lived. As Mr. Bennett stepped away, he noticed Ryan approaching from across the room, his smug grin plastered on his face. Nice presentation, Ryan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Too bad it was all smoke and mirrors. I guess you finally managed to get that glitch fixed, but it was too little, too late. You can't hide the truth forever, Ethan. Ethan narrowed his eyes, trying to stay calm. What truth? Ryan took a step closer, lowering his voice. You really think you can get away with this? Your project isn't as perfect as you think. There are flaws, and I know exactly where to find them. Ethan's stomach churned as Ryan's words hit their mark. The doubt crept in again, but Ethan refused to give in. Not now, not after everything he had been through. Ryan chuckled, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. You can't keep running from the truth, Ethan. Eventually, it will catch up to you, and I'll be right there when it does. Ethan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. You don't know anything about me. This is my work. I'm proud of it, and I don't need you or anyone else to tear it down. Ryan shrugged, his grin never fading. We'll see. We'll see. As Ryan turned and walked away, Ethan felt a surge of determination well up inside him. He couldn't let Ryan win. He couldn't let anyone make him doubt himself again. He had put everything into this project, and no one, especially Ryan, could take that away from him. After a long and tense few minutes, Ethan was called back into the room for the judge's feedback. He walked with his head held high, his mind still processing everything that had just happened. He wasn't going to let Ryan's words destroy him. This was his moment, and he was going to take it. The judges sat at the front of the room, nodding as he entered. They motioned for him to sit. "Ethan, congratulations on a well-executed presentation," one of the judges said, a middle-aged woman with glasses and a kind smile. "Your AI project showed a lot of potential. The glitch you encountered was a bit of a setback, but you handled it well. I'm impressed by your ability to problem-solve under pressure." Ethan nodded, relieved that the judges hadn't let the glitch overshadow his entire presentation. But there was still that one lingering doubt in the back of his mind. What if Ryan was right? What if there was something bigger he hadn't caught? Another judge, a tall man with a serious expression, spoke up. "That said, we do have some concerns about your AI's long-term viability. We'd like to see more data on its stability and scalability before moving forward." Ethan nodded again, taking mental notes. "I understand. I'll make sure to provide that." "Good," the judge said, scribbling something on his notepad. "We'll be in touch soon. But for now, keep up the hard work. You've got potential, Ethan. Just be careful who you trust." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He wasn't sure if the judge was speaking about Ryan or something more, but the warning stuck with him. Be careful who you trust. As the meeting wrapped up, Ethan's head was spinning. He knew there was still work to do, but he felt a new sense of resolve. He wasn't just going to sit back and let Ryan or anyone else push him around. It was time to take control of his own future. As he walked out of the room, he saw Ryan leaning against the wall, waiting for him. Well, looks like you managed to scrape by. But don't think this is over. I'll be waiting for you when you slip up," Ryan sneered. Ethan took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. He wasn't going to let Ryan's words affect him anymore. "You're wrong, Ryan. This is just the beginning." Ryan's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see about that." Ethan turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. He was done playing Ryan's games. He had earned his place here, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away from him. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Ethan was ready to face whatever came his way. And this time, he wasn't alone. With Mr. Bennett's support and his own newfound confidence, he was ready for the next chapter of his journey. Ethan's journey was far from over. With Ryan's threat still looming, the pressure of success weighing on him, and the challenges of his project ahead, could Ethan keep his resolve? Or would Ryan's relentless tactics be enough to break him? One thing was certain. The true test of Ethan's strength had only just begun. Ethan paced back and forth in his small apartment, the glow of his computer screen casting a soft light against the darkened walls. It was late, too late. But the work wasn't done. The judge's feedback had been clear. His AI project still needed refinement. But it wasn't just about the technical adjustments anymore. Ethan felt the pressure of everything that had happened over the past few months. His project, Ryan's constant antagonism, the expectations of everyone around him. It was all starting to weigh on him. He glanced at his phone, debating whether or not to check his messages. Since the competition, the silence from his family and friends had been deafening. No congratulatory texts, no words of encouragement. Maybe they were waiting for him to prove himself, to show that he could truly handle the pressure. Or maybe they had all just given up on him. After all, what had he really accomplished? Sure, he had made it to the competition, but was it enough? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Ethan froze. Who could it be at this hour? He hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. To his surprise, Mr. Bennett stood on the other side, looking more serious than usual. "Ethan, can we talk?" Mr. Bennett asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about Ryan, and I wanted to check in." Ethan nodded, motioning for him to sit. "I didn't expect you to come over." Mr. Bennett sat down across from him. "I know you've been under a lot of stress lately, but I've also seen how much you've grown throughout this project. You're not the same person you were when you started, and that's something worth celebrating." Ethan let out a quiet sigh, sinking into the chair next to Mr. Bennett. I don't know, Mr. Bennett. It feels like I'm always one step behind. Ryan's out there, waiting for me to mess up. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm not good enough. Mr. Bennett leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. Let me tell you something. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about pushing through the setbacks, the challenges, and yes, even the failures. You're doing all the right things. But you need to believe in yourself. You've already overcome so much. Don't let someone like Ryan make you question your worth. Ethan felt a flicker of hope stir inside him. Mr. Bennett was right. He had come so far. But there was still so much left to prove, not just to the judges, but to himself. He couldn't keep running from the fear of failure. Thanks, Mr. Bennett, Ethan said, his voice softer now. I needed to hear that. Mr. Bennett stood up, giving Ethan a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I know it's not easy, but I've seen the way you handle pressure. You're capable of so much more than you think. Just don't let Ryan get inside your head. He's not the measure of your success, you are. With that, Mr. Bennett left, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The weight of his words lingered in the air long after the door had closed. Ethan sat there for a long while, staring at the screen of his laptop. His project was nowhere near perfect, but it was his. He had worked tirelessly on it, and no one, not even Ryan, could take that away from him. The next day, as Ethan sat in his workshop, tweaking the AI's code, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. Ryan, you really think you can win this? You're going to crash and burn. I'll make sure of it. Ethan's heart raced. He'd known Ryan wouldn't back off, but the message still hit hard. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to push the anger down. He couldn't let Ryan control him. He couldn't let his insecurities rule his decisions. Instead of reacting, Ethan took a deep breath and opened his project files. There was work to do, and he wasn't about to let Ryan, or anyone else, distract him. He had come too far to quit now. Hours later, Ethan was still glued to his computer screen, eyes bleary and hands aching. But the breakthrough came. The AI, which had been struggling with its stability, suddenly responded the way he wanted it to. For the first time, everything clicked. The glitch that had haunted him for weeks was gone. His project was finally whole. But the relief was short-lived. As he leaned back in his chair, a voice broke through his focus. Impressive. Ethan jumped, spinning around to find Ryan standing in the doorway of his workshop. His arms were crossed, and his eyes held that same smug, condescending look. You've actually managed to fix it, Ryan said, his voice laced with sarcasm. Too bad it's all for nothing. You can't beat me. You never will. Ethan stood up, his hands trembling with frustration. Why do you keep doing this, Ryan? What do you get out of trying to tear me down? Ryan smirked, leaning against the doorframe. Because you need to know your place. You think you're special because of a little coding project? Please. The world doesn't work that way. Ethan took a step forward, his voice steady but fierce. The world doesn't work by letting people like you control everything. I'm done with being afraid of you. I'm not letting you dictate my worth. Not anymore. Ryan's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. We'll see about that, he said, before turning and walking away. Ethan stood there, his heart pounding. He had said it. He had finally stood up to Ryan. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of confidence. He wasn't just fighting for the project anymore. He was fighting for himself. And that made all the difference. Ethan had taken a stand against Ryan, but the battle was far from over. As the competition drew closer, Ethan knew that the final test wasn't just about his project. It was about proving to everyone, including himself, that he could succeed on his own terms. But with Ryan's threats still looming, could Ethan hold onto his resolve? Or would the pressure finally break him? Ethan sat in the dim glow of his laptop, the lines of code he had been painstakingly working on starting to blur together. It was nearing midnight, but the project wasn't ready. The pressure to make his AI perfect had become all-consuming. He had been making progress, but there were still bugs, glitches, and details he hadn't figured out yet. His mind was on autopilot, his fingers typing away without thought, when a sudden knock on his window startled him. Ethan jumped, heart racing. It was too late for anyone to be outside his apartment, especially Ryan, but as he walked toward the window, He could already feel the tension building inside him. He slowly pulled the blinds aside. Ryan stood in the alleyway below, grinning up at him. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What do you want, Ryan?" Ryan's voice carried up to him, casual and menacing. "I just wanted to check in. You know, see how the little project's going. You've made some progress, haven't you?" Ethan's mind raced. Ryan was toying with him again. He'd seen the way Ryan operated, getting under his skin, making him question everything he'd worked for. Ethan had to stay strong. He couldn't let Ryan win. "Not now. Why are you doing this?" Ethan called back, his voice tight with frustration. "You're just trying to mess with me. What's your point?" Ryan chuckled, the sound sending a chill down Ethan's spine. "The point is simple, Ethan. You're not good enough. You never were. And I'm here to remind you of that." Ethan's blood ran cold. He could feel the weight of Ryan's words like a heavy anchor pulling him down. But then, he remembered Mr. Bennett's words. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about pushing through the setbacks. He wasn't going to let Ryan's words destroy him. Not again. Ethan stood tall, pulling the blinds back down and walking away from the window. He wasn't going to give Ryan the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. But as the night wore on, his focus began to falter. Ryan's words echoed in his mind, the doubt creeping in once again. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Maybe his project was a failure. Maybe, just maybe, he had been fooling himself the whole time. The next morning, Ethan decided to take a break from his project. He needed to clear his mind, to refocus. After grabbing a quick breakfast, he found himself at the local park, trying to shake off the overwhelming sense of defeat. The morning air was crisp, but it couldn't quell the storm brewing inside him. He felt like he was on the edge of something, a breaking point. As he walked, his phone buzzed with a message. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the number. "Ryan, you know, I'm starting to feel bad for you. It must be hard knowing you'll never measure up. Just give up now. It'll be easier for everyone." Ethan stared at the screen, his hands shaking. This was it. Ryan was trying to finish what he had started, break him completely, but instead of succumbing to the anger and fear, something inside Ethan shifted. He remembered the countless hours of work, the breakthroughs he had achieved, and the moments when everything had clicked into place. He remembered Mr. Bennett's faith in him. He wasn't a failure, and he wasn't going to let Ryan define him anymore. Without thinking, Ethan replied, "You don't get it, Ryan. I'm not going to give up, and you can't stop me." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. A few moments later, Ryan's response appeared on the screen. "Ryan, we'll see about that. Good luck, Ethan. You're going to need it." Ethan put his phone away and took a deep breath. It wasn't much, but the exchange had done something for him. It had reminded him that he was in control of his own path. Ryan's words couldn't change that. With renewed determination, Ethan headed back to his apartment, ready to face whatever came next. He wasn't going to let Ryan's games drag him down anymore. If anything, he was going to use this as fuel to push forward. That afternoon, Ethan dove back into his project. His mind was clearer, his focus sharper. The AI was finally starting to take shape. The bugs that had been so elusive before seemed to melt away, one by one. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was close. As he worked, there was a knock at the door. Ethan opened it to find Mr. Bennett standing on the other side, a wide grin on his face. "I came by to check on you. How's it going?" Mr. Bennett asked, stepping inside. Ethan grinned back, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "It's going better than I expected, actually. I think I finally fixed the glitch." Mr. Bennett's eyebrows shot up. "That's fantastic. I knew you had it in you." Ethan felt a swell of pride in his chest. This was it, the moment where everything clicked. He had come so far, and now he was closer than ever to realizing his dream. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I couldn't have done it without your support," Ethan said, his voice sincere. Mr. Bennett clapped him on the back. "You've done all the hard work, Ethan. Now it's just about trusting yourself and finishing strong. But remember, no matter what happens, this journey is yours. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve it." Ethan nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "I won't." The doorbell rang again, and this time it wasn't Ryan. It was a package, A letter from the competition organizers. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The final step. Ethan ripped open the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. As he read the letter, a wave of relief washed over him. His project had been selected as one of the top contenders. He was moving on to the next round. But more importantly, it wasn't just his project that had earned him a place in the competition. It was his persistence, his determination to keep going despite everything. Ethan had reached a critical turning point, overcoming Ryan's attempts to break him and finally finding clarity in his project. But with the competition intensifying, would Ethan be able to maintain his focus and prove himself? Or would the pressure of the final round push him past his breaking point? The days leading up to the competition were a blur of late nights, caffeine-fueled coding sessions, and moments of doubt. Ethan's project had improved, but so had the pressure mounting on him. Every time he thought he was on the verge of success, another bug would appear. Each victory felt temporary, as if the finish line was always just out of reach. But something had changed. Ethan had stopped letting the doubt control him. He had a newfound determination that burned brighter than ever before. Ryan's taunts had done nothing but fuel his drive. Ethan wasn't going to let anyone, especially Ryan, dictate what he was capable of. The morning before the final submission for the competition, Ethan took a moment to step outside. The sun was barely rising, casting a soft golden glow over the city. It was quiet, too quiet for someone on the edge of a major milestone. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few weeks pressing against his chest. He had put everything into this project. It was his chance to prove himself, to show everyone, including himself, that he had what it took. He didn't want to think about Ryan's words anymore. He couldn't afford to let them creep in. Instead, he focused on the road ahead. The competition was fierce, and the judges were some of the top experts in the field. Ethan was no fool. He knew that his project might not win first place, but he was certain that it was going to stand out. It wasn't just about the code. It was about the heart, the passion behind it. And that was something that no one could take away from him. That afternoon, as Ethan finished finalizing his submission, he received a text from Mr. Bennett. He had been a steady source of support throughout the whole process, always pushing Ethan to do his best. Mr. Bennett, Ethan, I know you've been working tirelessly, but remember, this isn't just about winning. It's about the journey you've been on. You've grown, and that's the real victory. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Ethan smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. Mr. Bennett had always been there when things got tough, and his words were a reminder that the value of this experience was more than just a trophy or a title. But just as he was about to hit submit, his phone buzzed again. It was another message from Ryan. Ryan, you think you've got what it takes? You really believe you can compete with the best? Get real. You're just a kid who got lucky. When you fail, don't say I didn't warn you. Ethan stared at the screen, feeling the familiar anger rising within him. For a moment, his fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to respond with something sharp, something that would put Ryan in his place. But then, he remembered something important. Ryan's words had no power over him unless he allowed them to. With a deep breath, Ethan deleted the message without responding. He hit submit. As soon as he did, a sense of calm settled over him. He had done everything he could. There was no more room for self-doubt or second-guessing. He had given this project everything he had, and now it was out of his hands. That evening, as Ethan sat on his bed, reflecting on the journey, there was a knock on his door. He wasn't expecting anyone, but when he opened it, he was surprised to find Mr. Bennett standing there, a wide grin on his face. "I knew you'd get it done," Mr. Bennett said, stepping inside. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. You've come so far." Ethan chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Seriously? All that advice? You were right?" Mr. Bennett nodded. "I'm just here to guide you. The rest, you did on your own. But I think you've learned something really important through all this, haven't you?" Ethan thought about it for a moment. He had learned so much, about coding, about perseverance, and about himself. But the most important lesson had been that success wasn't defined by the outcome. It was about the growth, the setbacks, and the resilience. It was about not giving up when things seemed impossible. I've learned that I'm capable of more than I thought, Ethan said, his voice steady. And that no matter what happens, I can handle it. Mr. Bennett smiled, clearly pleased with Ethan's response. Exactly. And that's what's going to make you successful, no matter what path you choose. You've got the right mindset now. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. He had come a long way since that first day he had started this project. The doubt, the fear, the constant pressure. It had all shaped him into someone stronger, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for himself. Ryan might have tried to tear him down, but it had only made Ethan more determined to prove that he was capable of achieving great things. As the days passed, Ethan continued to focus on his journey, regardless of the competition results. He knew he had done his best, and that was all that mattered. The results would come soon, but Ethan had already won something far more valuable than any prize. He had won the battle within himself. As Ethan waits for the results of the competition, he realizes that the journey itself has been the greatest achievement. But when the announcement finally arrives, will the validation he's worked so hard for be enough to silence the doubts for good? Or will Ryan's words continue to haunt him? Ethan sat in his small apartment, his phone in hand, staring at the screen. It was 3 p.m., the exact time the competition results were supposed to be released. His heart pounded in his chest, his breath shallow as he anxiously refreshed the email inbox for the 5th time in the last 10 minutes. He had submitted his project with a sense of calm, but now, as the clock ticked down to the announcement, the anxiety had crept in again. The silence of the apartment was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of his laptop. His mind wandered, the flood of emotions from the past weeks rushing back. Had all the late nights, the doubts, the setbacks, the pressure, had it been enough? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but nothing seemed to make sense. He didn't know what to feel. It was as if everything hinged on this one email. He jumped when his phone buzzed. A new email. His heart skipped. Subject: competition results. Finalists announced. He opened it with trembling hands. Dear Ethan Blackwell, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of the top finalists for the National Tech Innovation Challenge. Congratulations on your outstanding project submission. The judges were impressed with the originality of your AI and your clear dedication to pushing the boundaries of the field. You are invited to the final round of the competition, where the top 3 winners will be announced. We look forward to seeing your continued progress and wish you the best of luck in the final stage. Warm regards, the National Tech Innovation Challenge Committee. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the email. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. He had made it. He was one of the top finalists. His hard work had paid off. But then, doubt crept in. He was happy, but the message hadn't said anything about winning. He had made it to the final round, but that was only the beginning. What if his project wasn't good enough to win? What if he was just another kid who got lucky? He shook his head, trying to shake off the negative thoughts. He had made it this far, and that was something to be proud of. Ryan's words, those relentless jabs at his abilities, they seemed distant now. The competition wasn't over, but Ethan was no longer the same person who had started this journey. He was stronger, more confident. Just as he was starting to process the email, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, I saw the results. I'm so proud of you, Ethan. You made it to the final round. I knew you had it in you. Ethan smiled and quickly typed a response. Ethan, I made it. But it's not over yet. There's still the final round. Mr. Bennett, don't sell yourself short. You've come so far. Just keep doing what you've been doing. You've got this. Ethan felt a swell of gratitude for Mr. Bennett. His words always seemed to ground him, to remind him of what mattered most. It wasn't about the final prize. It was about the journey, the growth, the lessons learned. After a few moments of reflection, Ethan picked up the phone again and typed a quick message to Ryan. He didn't know why he did it, but something inside him felt like it was time. It was time to show Ryan that he wasn't the same vulnerable kid anymore, that he wasn't going to back down, no matter what. Ethan, I made it, Ryan. Top 3. Thanks for all the encouragement. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The message wasn't about proving anything to Ryan. It was about proving something to himself. He was no longer defined by the doubts Ryan had planted in his mind. As the day wore on, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on the road that had led him here. There had been times when he wanted to quit, when the pressure seemed too much to bear. But now, standing on the brink of the final round of the competition, he felt like he had reached a new chapter in his life. He wasn't the kid who had cowered under Ryan's constant barrage of insults anymore. He wasn't even the same person who had doubted himself at every turn. He had evolved, not just as a coder but as a person. The competition was no longer just a contest. It was a validation of everything he had worked for. That evening, as he sat back in his chair, Ethan allowed himself a moment of reflection. The outcome of the competition still wasn't clear, but one thing was. He had fought for this. He had earned his place among the best. No matter what happened next, he had already won. But just as he was about to relax, his phone buzzed once again. This time, it was a text from Ryan. "Ryan, top 3? Huh? Guess that's something. But don't get too comfortable. You're not even close to winning." Ethan's smile faded as he read the message. Ryan was still trying to get under his skin, still trying to ruin his moment of victory. But this time, it didn't bother him. Ryan's words no longer had the same power. Instead of responding, Ethan simply set his phone down and turned his attention back to the work ahead of him. The final round of the competition was coming fast, and he wasn't going to waste another second on Ryan. With the final round of the competition just around the corner, Ethan is more determined than ever to prove himself. But with Ryan continuing to undermine him, will Ethan be able to stay focused on his goals? Or will the pressure push him to the edge once more? The days leading up to the final round of the competition felt like a race against time. Ethan had a renewed sense of purpose, but the weight of the upcoming event hung heavily over him. The top 3 finalists would present their projects to a panel of industry experts, including some of the most prominent figures in tech. The pressure was palpable. Ethan's project was good. He knew that. But was it enough? The competition was fierce, with each finalist bringing something unique to the table. The more he thought about it, the more the doubt crept in. He had been up for days, tweaking the code, refining the user interface, trying to make everything flawless. Yet, no matter how much he worked, there was always something that could be better. Always a new feature he could add, a bug he could fix. The line between done and perfect was so thin it was almost impossible to see. On the morning of the final round, Ethan woke up early, his stomach tied in knots. It was the day that would determine everything. The culmination of months of hard work, late nights, and endless hours spent coding. The competition had been a journey of self-discovery, but now it was time to put it all on the line. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. The nervousness was there, but there was also something else, a spark of confidence, a quiet knowing that he was ready. He had done the work, he had come this far, and now it was time to give everything he had. Ryan's words no longer carried the weight they once did, and even though he still couldn't escape the nagging sense of competition, he wasn't going to let it define him. Ethan quickly dressed in his best clothes, his favorite button-up shirt and a pair of clean jeans. He had always been a bit self-conscious about his appearance, especially in front of people like the judges who seemed so polished, so confident. But today, he decided, he wouldn't let anything distract him from the task at hand. He was going to present his project with pride. As he walked out the door, the world outside seemed brighter. The streets were bustling with people on their way to work, the sun shining through the trees. It was a reminder that, no matter what happened today, life would continue. This competition didn't define him. What defined him was his willingness to take risks, to push past his fears, to show up, even when it felt impossible. The event was held in a massive convention center, the walls lined with banners celebrating innovation and technology. Ethan entered the building, his heart pounding as he walked toward the registration desk. He saw a few familiar faces, other finalists who had made it this far. They were all dressed in business attire, carrying themselves with an air of confidence. It was clear that they were all prepared to fight for the top prize, and as he looked around, Ethan felt a flicker of doubt. These were the best of the best. Was he truly ready to compete at their level? But then, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "You ready, Ethan?" It was Mr. Bennett, standing off to the side, wearing a suit and looking as calm as ever. Ethan felt a rush of relief at the sight of him. Mr. Bennett had been there for him throughout the entire journey, through every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, and now, here he was, offering his support when Ethan needed it most. "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "You've come so far. I don't need to tell you how proud I am of you," Mr. Bennett said, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. "But remember, this isn't just about winning. It's about showing up. You've done the work, and now it's time to let your project speak for itself." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of Mr. Bennett's words settle in. He had done the work. The validation of this competition, whether it was first place or third, wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that he had pushed himself to his limits and learned more than he could have imagined. He was still worried, still feeling the pressure of the competition, but the self-doubt was beginning to fade. With Mr. Bennett by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Soon, it was time for the presentations to begin. Ethan was nervous, but he kept his focus on the project, on the journey he had taken to get here. As he walked into the presentation hall, he saw the other finalists getting ready, adjusting their slides, checking their demos. Everyone seemed so composed, so polished. For a moment, Ethan felt small again, like the kid who had barely made it past the first round. But then he remembered something. The journey wasn't about competing with anyone else. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above his doubts, above the taunts of Ryan, and show what he was truly capable of. When it was finally his turn to present, Ethan stepped up to the stage. The spotlight hit him, and for a moment, everything went quiet. He felt a wave of nerves rush over him, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. This was his moment. This was his chance. He began his presentation with the same words he had used to describe his project to Mr. Bennett. "This project isn't just about coding. It's about the future of artificial intelligence. How we can create technology that understands and interacts with the world in ways we never thought possible." As he spoke, he could see the judges leaning forward, intrigued. His project was good, but it was his passion, his belief in it, that began to shine through. As the presentation went on, Ethan could feel his confidence growing. This was what he had worked for. This was what he was meant to do. As he wrapped up his presentation, he glanced out at the audience, his heart still racing. He didn't know what the judges would say, but for the first time in this entire competition, he wasn't thinking about the result. He wasn't thinking about winning. He was just thinking about the work he had done, about how far he had come. He had already won. The judges' feedback was coming soon, but no matter the result, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Had his hard work, his dedication, and his belief in himself been enough to secure the top prize? Or would the competition prove to be just another obstacle on the long road to self-discovery? The moment Ethan had been waiting for finally arrived. His heart thudded in his chest as he waited for the judges' feedback, the weight of their gaze bearing down on him. The room felt unervingly silent, each second stretching longer than the last. It was hard to believe the competition was almost over. The judges had already finished evaluating the other finalists, their faces unreadable as they scribbled notes and exchanged hushed words. Ethan could feel the anticipation in the air. This was the moment that would determine everything. He glanced over at the other finalists, who were all nervously fidgeting in their seats. Ethan's stomach twisted with anxiety, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had done everything he could. The hard work was behind him now. All he could do was wait and see if it would be enough. The panel of judges, experts in the fields of technology, design, and artificial intelligence, was a tough crowd. He had seen them give cold, almost clinical evaluations to the other projects. Each judge had a reputation for being brutally honest, and while that could be unsettling, Ethan had learned to embrace it. Constructive criticism was how he had improved, and he couldn't shy away from it now. But then he remembered something. The journey wasn't about competing with anyone else. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above his doubts, above the taunts of Ryan, and show what he was truly capable of. When it was finally his turn to present, Ethan stepped up to the stage. The spotlight hit him, and for a moment, everything went quiet. He felt a wave of nerves rush over him, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. This was his moment. This was his chance. He began his presentation with the same words he had used to describe his project to Mr. Bennett. This project isn't just about coding. It's about the future of artificial intelligence, how we can create technology that understands and interacts with the world in ways we never thought possible. As he spoke, he could see the judges leaning forward, intrigued. His project was good, but it was his passion, his belief in it, that began to shine through. As the presentation went on, Ethan could feel his confidence growing. This was what he had worked for. This was what he was meant to do. As he wrapped up his presentation, he glanced out at the audience, his heart still racing. He didn't know what the judges would say, but for the first time in this entire competition, he wasn't thinking about the result. He wasn't thinking about winning. He was just thinking about the work he had done, about how far he had come. He had already won. The judges' feedback was coming soon, but no matter the result, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Had his hard work, his dedication, and his belief in himself been enough to secure the top prize? Or would the competition prove to be just another obstacle on the long road to self-discovery? The moment Ethan had been waiting for finally arrived. His heart thudded in his chest as he waited for the judges' feedback, the weight of their gaze bearing down on him. The room felt unnervingly silent, each second stretching longer than the last. It was hard to believe the competition was almost over. The judges had already finished evaluating the other finalists, their faces unreadable as they scribbled notes and exchanged hushed words. Ethan could feel the anticipation in the air. This was the moment that would determine everything. He glanced over at the other finalists, who were all nervously fidgeting in their seats. Ethan's stomach twisted with anxiety, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had done everything he could. The hard work was behind him now. All he could do was wait and see if it would be enough. The panel of judges, experts in the fields of technology, design, and artificial intelligence, was a tough crowd. He had seen them give cold, almost clinical evaluations to the other projects. Each judge had a reputation for being brutally honest, and while that could be unsettling, Ethan had learned to embrace it. Constructive criticism was how he had improved, and he couldn't shy away from it now. Finally, one of the judges, a tall woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, stood up. She cleared her throat, her eyes scanning the room. "Ethan, your project has impressed us all," she began, her voice calm but firm. "We can see the immense amount of work you've put into this. The concept is innovative, and the execution is clean." However, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Here it came, the part where they tore apart his hard work. "Your project shows great promise," she continued, "but it lacks some key elements of scalability. In its current form, it might work for small-scale applications, but it would need significant adjustments to function on a larger scale." Ethan's mind raced. He had expected the critiques, but hearing them so bluntly still stung. His project, his vision, had always felt right to him. It was hard to accept that the thing he had poured so much of himself into might not be good enough. "You're right," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I hadn't fully considered the scalability aspect. I was focused more on the functionality and the user experience. I'll take that into account in the future." The judge nodded approvingly, clearly pleased by his level-headed response. "That's the kind of attitude we like to see. You've got the passion, the technical skills, and the willingness to learn. With a little more experience, you could really go far in this field." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he still felt a pang of disappointment. It wasn't the validation he had hoped for, but it wasn't a rejection either. He had been given valuable feedback, and that was something he could work with. In this competition, it wasn't just about winning. It was about learning, about growth. And in that sense, he had already won. As the judges continued their evaluations of the other finalists, Ethan found himself reflecting on the entire journey. He had started this competition as an underdog, a kid who had been bullied, underestimated, and written off. But here he was, standing in front of a panel of industry leaders, holding his ground, standing tall. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. The final judge, an older man with glasses and a kind smile, stood up next. He had been quiet throughout the entire session, but now his eyes locked onto Ethan with a look of curiosity. "You know, Ethan," he began, "when you first stepped onto this stage, I didn't know what to expect. But I've seen something in your presentation, in your demeanor, that speaks to a deeper level of understanding. You've grown throughout this competition. More than that, you've shown the kind of resilience that will take you far. Your project might not be perfect, but your journey, your ability to improve and learn from your mistakes, that's what sets you apart. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had come into this competition thinking that the only thing that mattered was winning, but now he realized that it wasn't just about the prize. It was about the person he was becoming. The skills, the experiences, and the lessons learned had already shaped him into someone far different from the person who had first walked into the competition months ago. As the judges wrapped up their final comments, Ethan felt a surge of pride. He had done it. He had stood his ground, faced his fears, and learned along the way. The competition had tested him in ways he never imagined, but he had come out stronger, more confident in his abilities, and more certain of his future. The final decision was coming soon, but Ethan knew that no matter the outcome, he had already achieved something far more valuable than a trophy. He had found his voice, and he had found a belief in himself that was unshakable. With the judges' feedback in mind, Ethan took a deep breath. The competition wasn't over yet, but his journey was far from finished. Would he take home the top prize? Or was the real reward something deeper, something that would fuel his passion for innovation and push him forward to even greater heights? Where Ethan deals with the outcome of the competition, reflecting on the lessons learned and his growth throughout the process. The room was buzzing with excitement as the final results were about to be announced. Ethan sat with the other finalists, his nerves running high, but his thoughts were surprisingly clear. He had poured everything into this competition. The late nights, the stress, the moments of self-doubt. But now, at the end of it all, he felt a strange calm wash over him. He had come further than he ever imagined. He glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the other competitors. They were all just as tense as he was, waiting for the judges to call their names. Ethan had watched them all present, impressed by the skill and creativity they'd each brought to the table. There were moments when he felt like he didn't belong here, when his project seemed small in comparison to some of the others. But now, looking at them, he realized that they were all just people, all fighting for the same thing, all sharing the same nervous anticipation. The host stepped up to the podium, his voice cutting through the tension. "Thank you all for your outstanding work throughout this competition," he began, smiling as he surveyed the room. "It's been an incredible journey, and we've seen some truly innovative projects. But there can only be one winner." Ethan's pulse quickened, his palms suddenly clammy. His mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next. What if it wasn't enough? What if all his hard work had been for nothing? "Let's get to it," the host continued, drawing out the suspense. "The third-place winner is—" Ethan held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. "Ava Thompson." A round of applause erupted as Ava stood up, her face beaming with excitement. Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of pride for her. She had been one of the strongest competitors, and it was clear she had earned her place in the top 3. He gave her a nod of approval as she walked up to accept her prize. "Second place goes to—" The host's voice paused for dramatic effect. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Ryan Carter." Ethan froze. He hadn't expected Ryan to be named second, but it made sense. Ryan had always been a strong competitor, and his project had impressed the judges. Ethan watched as Ryan took the stage, trying to read his expression. Was he disappointed? Or was he just playing it cool? Now, it was down to him. The host smiled broadly as he looked at Ethan. "And that brings us to our winner. The first-place winner of the competition is Ethan Reynolds." For a moment, Ethan couldn't believe it. His name echoed in his ears, but it didn't quite register. The room erupted into applause, and he stood there, frozen in shock. This was the moment he had worked for, the moment he had dreamed of, but it didn't feel like he imagined it would. There was no overwhelming sense of victory, no rush of triumph. Instead, there was a quiet sense of fulfillment, a sense that this moment had been a long time coming. Ethan walked up to the stage, his legs feeling like jelly. The host handed him a trophy, but instead of focusing on the prize, his mind kept returning to the journey that had led him here. He thought about the late nights, the challenges, the setbacks. He thought about how much he had grown, not just as a competitor, but as a person. He had learned to trust himself, to push past his doubts, to rise above the opinions of others. As the applause died down, Ethan smiled and gave a quick thank you speech. He thanked his family, Mr. Bennett, and his friends for their support. But the most important part of his speech was this: this competition was never about winning for me. It was about proving to myself that I could keep going, that I could face my fears and push through the challenges. Winning is great, but the real prize is what I've learned along the way. After the ceremony, Ethan felt a rush of emotions. The trophy in his hands felt heavier than he expected, but not in the way he thought. It wasn't a symbol of his success. It was a reminder of everything he had overcome. The judgment, the criticism, the doubts, all of it had led him here. And now, the true journey was just beginning. As he left the competition hall, his phone buzzed with messages from friends and family congratulating him. Even Ryan had sent him a message. "Congrats, man. You earned it," it read. Ethan couldn't help but smile. Despite their rivalry, he knew Ryan had respected him all along. Ethan's mind began to shift toward the future. What would he do next? His project wasn't perfect, but it had potential. The feedback from the judges had given him a clearer idea of what he needed to work on, and he was already making plans to continue refining it. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but now he was ready to face it. The competition had been a milestone, but it was only the beginning. Ethan was determined to keep pushing forward, to keep improving, to keep learning. There would be setbacks along the way and moments of doubt, but he had proven to himself that he could overcome anything. As the evening sky turned to dusk, Ethan looked at the trophy in his hands. It wasn't the end of the journey. It was the start of something even bigger. With the competition behind him, Ethan stood on the edge of a new chapter. The lessons learned, the confidence gained, and the friendships formed would all play a part in his next steps. What was next for him? Would the real challenges begin now? One thing was certain: Ethan's story was far from over. The following morning, Ethan woke up to the golden sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. The events of the previous day felt like a vivid dream, but the trophy on his desk reminded him that it had been real. For a moment, he just lay there, letting the enormity of his achievement sink in. He had done it. He had proven to himself and to the world that he was capable of great things. Yet, as the excitement of winning began to settle, Ethan realized something profound. The competition had ended, but his journey was far from over. The feedback from the judges echoed in his mind, particularly the part about scalability. While he had achieved something incredible, he knew his project was just the beginning. There was so much more to learn, so much more to build. After a quick breakfast, Ethan sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and began reviewing his project files. He wanted to dive right into refining his work, implementing the changes suggested by the judges. His notebook was already filled with ideas, ways to improve the code, enhance the interface, and make the system more robust. It was exciting to think about the possibilities, but also a little overwhelming. "Where do I even start?" he muttered to himself. Before he could get too deep into planning, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Bennett. "Congratulations again, Ethan. Let me know when you're free. I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Ethan's curiosity was piqued. What could Mr. Bennett want to talk about? He quickly replied, setting up a time to meet that afternoon. Later that day, Ethan arrived at Mr. Bennett's office, the familiar scent of books and coffee filling the air. Mr. Bennett greeted him warmly, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You've come a long way, Ethan," Mr. Bennett said as they sat down. "I knew you had it in you, but seeing you grow and excel has been truly inspiring." "Thank you," Ethan replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Mr. Bennett waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You had the talent and determination all along. I just gave you a nudge in the right direction." "So, what did you want to talk about?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. Mr. Bennett reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I've been in touch with a few colleagues in the tech industry," he said. "They're always on the lookout for young talent like you. I think your project has the potential to go beyond just a school competition. With the right mentorship and resources, it could become something much bigger." Ethan's eyes widened. "You really think so?" "I know so," Mr. Bennett said firmly. "I've arranged for you to meet with some professionals who specialize in AI development. They're interested in seeing your work and possibly helping you take it to the next level." Ethan felt a surge of excitement and nerves. The idea of presenting his project to industry professionals was both thrilling and intimidating. But if there was one thing he had learned from the competition, it was that he was capable of rising to the challenge. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan spent countless hours refining his project, incorporating the judges' feedback and making improvements. He worked late into the night, fueled by a combination of passion and determination. Every line of code, every tweak to the design brought him closer to a version of his project that he could be truly proud of. During this time, he also stayed in touch with the friends he had made during the competition. Ava and Ryan became two of his biggest supporters, offering feedback and encouragement whenever he hit a roadblock. Their camaraderie reminded Ethan that success wasn't just about individual achievement, it was also about the connections and relationships formed along the way. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Ethan found himself in a sleek conference room, his laptop set up and ready to go. Across the table sat three professionals, an AI specialist, a venture capitalist, and a product manager, each with years of experience in the tech industry. Ethan took a deep breath and began his presentation. He explained the concept behind his project, demonstrated its features, and outlined his vision for the future. His voice was steady, his passion evident in every word. He could see the professionals nodding along, their expressions thoughtful. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, the AI specialist spoke. "Ethan, this is impressive work," she said. "For someone your age, the level of technical skill and creativity you've demonstrated is remarkable. There's definitely potential here, but as you know, there's still a lot of work to be done." The venture capitalist chimed in. "What I like most about your project is its practicality. It's not just a theoretical idea, it's something that could genuinely benefit people. With the right support, I think this could go far." Ethan felt a surge of pride, but he also understood the weight of their words. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. As Ethan walked out of the meeting, he felt a sense of clarity. The competition had been a significant chapter in his life, but now a new chapter was beginning. The opportunities ahead were endless, and while the path might be uncertain, he knew he had the skills, the passion, and the determination to navigate it. Standing outside, Ethan looked up at the sky, the sun shining brightly above. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a drive to keep pushing forward. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Ethan's story had taken a new turn, filled with opportunities and challenges that would test him even further. How would he navigate the world of professional development? Would his vision become a reality? One thing was certain, the best was yet to come. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at a blank screen. The meeting with the industry professionals had been a turning point, filling him with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Their feedback had been invaluable, but now it was time to take action. He needed to create a roadmap for the next phase of his project. "All right, focus," Ethan muttered to himself. He started typing, outlining a plan to address the areas for improvement that the professionals had highlighted. Scalability, user interface, and advanced features, all areas he needed to tackle. It felt daunting. For so long, his project had been a school competition entry. Now, it was evolving into something much larger. But Ethan reminded himself that he didn't have to do it alone. One of the biggest lessons he'd learned from the competition was the value of collaboration. With that in mind, he reached out to Ava and Ryan. They had been there from the beginning, and he trusted their insights. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with enthusiastic replies. "Ava, of course. I'd love to help. When can we meet?" "Ryan, count me in. Let's make this thing amazing." Ethan smiled, feeling a wave of relief. Together, they could accomplish so much more. The following weekend, Ethan hosted a brainstorming session at his house. Ava arrived first, armed with her laptop and a stack of notes. "I've been thinking about ways to improve the user experience," she said, her enthusiasm contagious. "We can make the interface more intuitive and visually appealing." Ryan showed up shortly after, carrying a whiteboard. "I've got ideas for scalability," he said, setting up the board and sketching out diagrams. If we optimize the backend, we can handle more users without compromising performance. Ethan watched as his friends dove into their ideas, feeling a surge of gratitude. They weren't just helping. They were as invested in this project as he was. It felt like the start of something special, a team united by a shared vision. As they worked, the ideas flowed freely. They debated, sketched out concepts, and made a list of priorities. By the end of the day, they had a clear plan for the next steps. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and his team spent countless hours refining the project. There were moments of frustration, bugs in the code, disagreements over design choices, but they always found a way to push through. One particularly challenging day, Ethan discovered a critical flaw in the system. It was a scalability issue that threatened to derail their progress. For hours, he worked tirelessly, trying different solutions, but nothing seemed to work. Feeling defeated, he called Ava and Ryan for help. They showed up without hesitation, bringing fresh perspectives and ideas. Together, they tackled the problem, testing different approaches until they finally found a solution. When the system finally ran smoothly, Ethan let out a triumphant cheer. "We did it!" he exclaimed, high-fiving his friends. It was a moment of pure joy, a reminder that no challenge was insurmountable when they worked together. As the project progressed, Ethan began reaching out to the connections he had made through the competition and the industry meeting. He sent updates to the professionals who had shown interest, asking for feedback and advice. To his surprise, many of them responded, offering insights and encouragement. One of the professionals, the AI specialist, invited Ethan to a tech conference. "It's a great opportunity to showcase your work and network with others in the field," she said. Ethan hesitated. The idea of presenting at a conference was intimidating, but he knew it was a chance he couldn't pass up. With Ava and Ryan's encouragement, he accepted the invitation. The day of the conference arrived, and Ethan found himself standing in a packed auditorium. His nerves were on edge as he prepared to present his project to a room full of tech enthusiasts and professionals. "You've got this," Ava whispered, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. Ryan nodded in agreement. "Just be yourself," he said. "They're going to love it." Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped onto the stage. The bright lights and expectant faces were overwhelming at first, but as he began to speak, his confidence grew. He talked about his journey, the challenges he had faced, and the vision behind his project. The audience listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. When Ethan finished, the room erupted into applause. He felt a wave of relief and pride, knowing he had taken a big step forward. After the presentation, Ethan was approached by several professionals who were eager to learn more about his project. One of them, a venture capitalist, expressed interest in funding its development. "This has real potential," she said. "With the right resources, we could bring this to market and make a real impact." Ethan was stunned. The idea of turning his project into a fully fledged product felt like a dream. But now, it was within reach. Ethan's world was expanding, filled with new opportunities and challenges. How would he navigate this next chapter? Would his project become the success he dreamed of? The stakes were higher than ever, but Ethan was ready to rise to the challenge. Ethan's excitement over the venture capitalist's offer was tempered by the magnitude of the decision he faced. Turning his project into a market-ready product wasn't just about coding. It was about creating a viable business. The thought thrilled and intimidated him in equal measure. After a celebratory dinner with Ava and Ryan, Ethan decided to meet with the venture capitalist to discuss the offer in detail. He wanted to understand exactly what it would entail and whether he was ready to take this leap. The venture capitalist, Natalie Reed, welcomed Ethan into her sleek downtown office. She was a charismatic woman with a sharp intellect and a knack for identifying potential in budding entrepreneurs. "Ethan, your project is impressive," Natalie began. "What stands out most to me is your passion and your ability to execute. With some strategic guidance and funding, this could become something revolutionary." Ethan nodded, grateful for her belief in him. "Thank you, Ms. Reed. I'm excited about the possibilities, but I want to make sure I understand what this partnership would look like." Natalie smiled. "Smart question. Let me break it down. My firm would provide the initial funding to scale your project, hiring a team, purchasing necessary resources, and developing a go-to-market strategy. In return, we'd take a percentage of equity in the business. Ethan scribbled notes as she spoke, his mind racing with questions. And what about creative control? He asked. This project is deeply personal to me, and I want to make sure its vision stays intact. Natalie's expression softened. That's the beauty of this, Ethan. We're not here to take over. We're here to support you. You'll have the final say on major decisions, though we'll guide you to ensure success. It was a lot to consider. Ethan thanked Natalie for her time and promised to get back to her with his decision. As he left the office, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was an incredible opportunity, but it was also a significant responsibility. Back at home, Ethan reached out to Mr. Bennett. Over coffee, he shared everything he had learned from the meeting. Mr. Bennett listened carefully, then leaned back in his chair. This is a pivotal moment, Ethan. The chance to take your work to the next level doesn't come often, but it's important to go into it with your eyes open. Have you considered forming a team to help you manage this? Ethan nodded. I've been thinking about it. Ava and Ryan have been amazing, but this might be bigger than the three of us can handle. That's a wise observation, Mr. Bennett said. The right team can make all the difference. But remember, no matter how big this gets, stay true to your vision. That's what makes your project unique. Ethan returned to Ava and Ryan with the news of Natalie's offer. They were thrilled but also aware of the challenges ahead. If we're going to do this, we need more help, Ava said. We need people with expertise in areas we don't cover. Ryan agreed. Yeah, like marketing, legal stuff, and maybe someone with experience in launching products. Together, they brainstormed potential candidates, starting with people they had met through the competition and the tech conference. Ethan reached out to several individuals, pitching them the vision for the project and inviting them to join the team. To his delight, many were eager to be part of the journey. By the end of the week, Ethan had assembled a small but passionate team that included a marketing strategist, a financial advisor, and a software engineer with industry experience. As the team began working together, it became clear that scaling the project was going to be a monumental task. The first challenge was securing intellectual property rights. Ethan and his team had to navigate the legal complexities of patenting their technology, a process that was both time-consuming and expensive. We'll need to use some of the funding for this, Ava said during one of their meetings. It's an investment, but it's necessary if we want to protect the project. The team unanimously agreed, and Ethan contacted a patent attorney recommended by Natalie. The process was tedious, involving countless meetings and revisions, but after several weeks, they secured the patent. It was a significant milestone, one that gave them a sense of legitimacy and confidence. With the legal groundwork in place, the team turned its attention to refining the project. Ethan spent hours with the software engineer, working on advanced features that would set their product apart. Meanwhile, the marketing strategist developed a branding plan, complete with a name for the product, Insight AI. The name resonated with everyone. It captured the essence of the project, a tool designed to provide meaningful insights and solutions through artificial intelligence. Ryan suggested creating a demo to showcase the product's potential. We need something tangible to show investors and potential partners, he said. Ethan loved the idea and got to work. The demo was simple yet effective, highlighting the core features of Insight AI. When it was ready, the team held a small event to present it to a group of industry professionals. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several attendees expressing interest in future collaborations. With momentum building, Ethan felt ready to move forward with Natalie's offer. He met with her again to finalize the terms, feeling more confident this time thanks to the team he had built and the progress they had made. As they signed the agreement, Natalie shook Ethan's hand. Congratulations, Ethan. This is just the beginning. Ethan smiled, a sense of determination filling him. He knew there were challenges ahead, but he also knew he had the support and resources to face them. Ethan's project had taken its first steps into the professional world. The stakes were higher, the challenges greater, but so were the opportunities. How would he and his team navigate this next phase? Would Insight AI live up to its potential? The journey was far from over. With the ink barely dry on the agreement with Natalie Reed, Ethan and his team found themselves in uncharted territory. The infusion of capital opened new doors, but it also brought a slew of challenges. Scaling the project wasn't just about refining code anymore. It was about managing people, balancing budgets, and making decisions that would shape the future of Inside AI. Deadlines loomed as the team worked tirelessly to meet the milestones outlined in their agreement with Natalie. They needed to deliver a working prototype of the enhanced platform within 3 months. For Ethan, this meant leading a team while continuing to develop the project he had started in his bedroom. Late one night, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at lines of code that refused to cooperate. His head throbbed from hours of debugging. A knock on the door startled him. It was Ava, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You've been at this for hours," she said, setting one mug beside him. "Take a break. You're no good to the team if you burn out." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "I just feel like there's so much riding on this. What if we don't deliver? What if Natalie regrets investing in us?" Ava gave him a reassuring smile. "We've come this far because of your vision and determination. Trust that we'll figure it out together." Her words brought a measure of calm, and Ethan allowed himself a short break before diving back in. As the workload increased, it became clear that the team needed more hands. Ethan and Natalie worked together to recruit additional talent, focusing on individuals with expertise in artificial intelligence, UX/UI design, and data analysis. One of the new hires, a seasoned AI developer named Dr. Marcus Lee, brought a wealth of experience but also a strong personality. He wasn't shy about challenging Ethan's ideas, which led to heated debates during team meetings. "I respect your vision, Ethan," Dr. Lee said during one particularly tense exchange. "But if we want Inside AI to stand out, we need to push the boundaries." Ethan bristled but listened carefully. While the debates were frustrating, they often led to breakthroughs. Over time, Ethan learned to navigate the dynamics of managing a diverse team, recognizing the value in different perspectives. Meanwhile, the marketing team faced its own hurdles. Their initial branding efforts had received mixed reviews, with some industry insiders criticizing the product's vague messaging. "We need a clear narrative," said Mia, the marketing strategist, during a brainstorming session. "What problem are we solving? Why should people care about Inside AI?" Ava chimed in. "What about positioning it as a tool for small businesses? AI is often seen as something only big companies can afford, but Inside AI could change that." The idea resonated with the team, and they began crafting a campaign around accessibility and empowerment. The tagline, "AI for Everyone," emerged, capturing the essence of their mission. Despite their progress, Ethan couldn't shake a lingering sense of doubt. The pressure to meet expectations weighed heavily on him, and he began second-guessing his decisions. One evening, he confided in Ryan. "What if I'm not cut out for this? I'm just a kid who wrote some code. What if I'm in over my head?" Ryan looked at him thoughtfully. "You're not just a kid, Ethan. You're the kid who inspired all of us to believe in this project. Yeah, it's tough, but no one's expecting you to have all the answers. That's why we're a team." Ethan nodded, grateful for Ryan's support. He realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about guiding the team toward solutions together. After months of grueling work, the team finally reached a pivotal moment, the unveiling of their enhanced prototype. They hosted a private demo for Natalie and several other investors, showcasing the platform's new features and capabilities. Ethan stood nervously at the front of the room as the demo began. The platform's sleek interface and intuitive functionality drew murmurs of approval from the audience. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Natalie approached Ethan with a broad smile. "This is exactly what I was hoping for," she said. "You've exceeded my expectations." Ethan felt a rush of relief and pride. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that they were on the right track. With the successful demo, word of Inside AI began to spread. Media outlets picked up the story, and Ethan found himself in the spotlight. He was invited to speak at tech panels, interviewed for podcasts, and even featured in a local news segment. While the attention was thrilling, it also added to the pressure. Every article and interview seemed to raise expectations, and Ethan worried about living up to the hype. During a particularly nerve-wracking interview, the reporter asked, "What's next for Inside AI?" How do you plan to compete with established tech giants? Ethan hesitated, then smiled. We're not here to compete. We're here to create something meaningful. Inside AI isn't about being the biggest. It's about making a difference. The reporter nodded, clearly impressed. Ethan's words resonated, and the interview became a turning point in shaping public perception of the project. As the team celebrated their recent successes, Ethan reminded them that the journey was far from over. There were still features to refine, challenges to overcome, and a product to launch. Every step we've taken has brought us closer to our goal, Ethan said during a team meeting. Let's keep that momentum going. His words rallied the team, fueling their determination to push forward. The road ahead was daunting, but Ethan was no longer the unsure kid who had started this journey. He was a leader, ready to guide his team toward the future. Ethan and his team were on the brink of something extraordinary, but with greater success came greater challenges. Would they maintain their momentum, or would the pressures of scaling bring them to a breaking point? The next phase would test their resolve like never before. The launch date for Inside AI was finally set. In just 6 weeks, the world would see the culmination of Ethan's vision, the team's hard work, and Natalie's investment. The weight of the deadline bore down on everyone, sparking a mix of excitement and anxiety. The team knew this was their moment to prove that their creation wasn't just another AI tool. It was a game changer. The office buzzed with energy as the team raced to complete the final version of the product. Developers worked late into the night, perfecting algorithms and squashing bugs. The marketing team crafted a comprehensive launch campaign, complete with social media teasers, a product website, and a virtual launch event. Ethan moved between teams, offering support where he could. He spent hours reviewing the product's interface with Ava, ensuring it was user-friendly. This has to feel intuitive, he said. If users don't understand it right away, we'll lose them. Ava nodded. Don't worry, we've got this. The interface is already leagues ahead of the competition. Meanwhile, Ryan was leading the charge on user testing, gathering feedback from a group of beta testers. Some of their comments were encouraging, but others pointed to areas that still needed improvement. Ethan found himself torn between the need to address every issue and the reality of their looming deadline. As the pressure mounted, so did tensions within the team. A disagreement over a key feature boiled over during a meeting. I'm telling you, we can't launch without this feature, Dr. Lee argued. It's what sets us apart. But it's not ready, Ryan countered. If we include it now, we're risking a buggy launch. It's better to hold off and roll it out in an update. Ethan listened, his mind racing. Both arguments had merit, but the decision ultimately rested with him. He took a deep breath before speaking. We'll prioritize stability for the launch. I understand the importance of this feature, but it's better to do it right than rush it. Dr. Lee wasn't happy, but he respected Ethan's call. The moment reinforced the challenges of leadership and the importance of making tough decisions for the greater good. As the launch approached, Ethan received an unexpected message. Elon Musk wanted to meet with him again. The tech mogul had been following Inside AI's journey and was impressed by their progress. When they met, Elon offered words of encouragement. What you've built is incredible, Ethan. Launches are tough, but remember, every great product starts with a leap of faith. Trust your team and your vision. Ethan left the meeting feeling reinvigorated. Elon's words reminded him of the importance of believing in himself, even when doubts crept in. The day of the launch arrived. The team had organized a virtual event to showcase Inside AI to the world. The turnout exceeded their expectations, with thousands of attendees tuning in from around the globe. Ethan took the stage, virtually, to deliver the keynote speech. As he spoke about the journey that had led to this moment, he felt a wave of emotion. Inside AI started as an idea, a way to make artificial intelligence accessible to everyone. Today, that idea becomes a reality. This isn't just about technology, it's about empowering people to achieve more. The demonstration that followed was seamless, showcasing the platform's capabilities and potential. By the end of the event, the team had received countless inquiries from businesses, investors, and media outlets. As the event wrapped up, Ethan and his team gathered in their office, exhausted but elated. They had pulled off a successful launch, and the initial feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Natalie Reed called to congratulate them. "This is just the beginning," she said. "You've built something extraordinary, and the world is starting to notice." For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to relax. The journey had been grueling, but it had also been worth every challenge. Late that night, Ethan sat alone in the office, surrounded by the remnants of the launch celebration. He thought about how far he had come, from a bullied kid struggling to complete his homework to the leader of a groundbreaking tech startup. The journey wasn't over. There were updates to develop, markets to explore, and challenges yet to face. But in that moment, Ethan felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had turned his struggles into something meaningful, and he had done it with the support of the people who believed in him. Inside AI had taken its first steps into the world, but the road ahead was far from easy. Would the product live up to its promise? Could Ethan and his team sustain their momentum? The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready to face whatever came next. The days following the launch of Inside AI were a whirlwind. The product's initial reception was overwhelmingly positive. Reviews praised its accessibility and intuitive design, calling it a game-changer for small businesses. But with success came new challenges: scaling operations, addressing customer feedback, and navigating a growing industry spotlight. Insight AI quickly gained traction, with hundreds of small businesses signing up in the first month. From boutique shops looking to optimize inventory to freelance designers seeking efficient scheduling tools, the platform's versatility became its strongest selling point. Ethan found himself fielding invitations to speak at conferences and industry panels. During one such event, he was asked, "What drives you to keep pushing boundaries in technology?" Ethan smiled, recalling the struggles that had shaped him. "For me, it's about creating tools that make a difference. Technology should empower people, not intimidate them. I want to break down barriers and show that innovation can belong to everyone." His words resonated with the audience, earning a standing ovation. Ethan realized he had become more than just a developer. He was now a voice for accessible innovation. While the team celebrated their achievements, they were also keenly aware of the challenges ahead. Scaling a product meant addressing issues they hadn't anticipated. Server overloads, compatibility bugs, and customer support demands stretched the team thin. "Growing pains," Ryan said one evening, running his hand through his hair. "It's a good problem to have, but man, it's exhausting." Ethan nodded. "We'll get through this. We always do. Let's focus on what we can improve and keep moving forward." Despite the long hours and mounting pressure, the team's camaraderie remained unshaken. They leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared purpose. As Insight AI's impact grew, so did Ethan. The journey had changed him in profound ways. He was no longer the uncertain teenager who had walked into that cafe to meet Elon Musk. He had learned to lead, to trust others, and to believe in himself. One afternoon, Ethan visited his old high school to speak to a group of students. Standing in front of the same classrooms where he had once felt invisible, he shared his story. "I used to think success was about being the smartest person in the room," he said. "But what I've learned is that success comes from resilience, collaboration, and a willingness to keep going, even when things get tough." After his talk, a shy student approached him. "Your story really inspired me," she said. "I want to be an engineer, but sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough." Ethan smiled. "I used to feel the same way. But the truth is, you don't have to have all the answers right away. Just take it one step at a time. You've got this." To celebrate their milestones, Ethan organized a team retreat. They rented a cabin in the mountains, where they could unwind and reflect on their journey. One evening, around a crackling fire, Ethan raised a toast. "To the best team I could ever ask for," he said. "None of this would have been possible without each of you. This isn't just my dream anymore, it's ours. Here's to the future of Insight AI." The team cheered, their bond stronger than ever. They had built something remarkable together, and they were ready to take on whatever came next. As the company grew, Ethan and his team began exploring new possibilities for Insight AI. They expanded their platform to include tools for education, healthcare, and nonprofit organizations, staying true to their mission of making technology accessible to all. Ethan also continued to mentor young developers, using his platform to uplift others. He remembered what it felt like to doubt himself and wanted to ensure that others had the support and encouragement they needed to succeed. One evening, Ethan found himself sitting at the same cafe where his journey had started. The memory of that first meeting with Elon Musk felt like a lifetime ago. As he sipped his coffee, he overheard a young boy at the next table talking excitedly about a coding project he was working on. The boy's enthusiasm reminded Ethan of himself at that age. "Excuse me," Ethan said, leaning over. "Are you into programming?" The boy nodded eagerly. "Yeah, I'm building a game. It's not much yet, but it's a start." Ethan smiled, handing him a business card. "Keep at it, and if you ever need advice, feel free to reach out." The boy's eyes widened as he recognized the name. "You're Ethan Carter. You made Insight AI." Ethan laughed. "Guilty as charged. But trust me, I started just like you. Keep dreaming big." As Ethan walked out of the cafe, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His journey wasn't just about building a successful company. It was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to believe in themselves and their ideas. Insight AI had become more than a product. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when resilience met opportunity, when people came together to build something greater than themselves. Ethan knew the future held more challenges, but he was ready. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, filled with possibilities. Ethan's story reminds us that every great journey starts with a single step, and sometimes a little help along the way. What challenges are you facing, and how will you rise above them? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow for more inspiring stories. Because who knows? Your next idea might just change the world.